In the midst of World War II, the Allies had successfully defeated the German army in North Africa.
North Africa was the proving ground for the Allied war effort, going against Hitler's machine.
From here, the Allies planned to launch a second European front.
The question is, where in Southern Europe do we attack?
The Allies have to deceive the Germans of their true invasion plans, as German defenses are too strong.
We're not in the position to match the enemy yet on continental Europe in a conventional military fashion.
Two young British intelligence agents in MI5 proposed one of the most secretive and daring missions of the Second World War.
Espionage was a major part of World War II. The British perfected this to a science.
Those were desperate times, and they called for desperate measures.
If the Allies don't convince the Germans to maximize their defenses in the wrong place, it will be a disaster.
If the Germans figure this out, it is mass casualties for thousands and thousands of Allied soldiers.
It's like a chess game. It's not the person whose queen wins the game, it's using every piece to its best advantage.
Just one wrong move, and this mission would fail, and many lives would be lost. In April 1943, a decomposing body in a Royal Marines uniform is discovered off the coast of Huelva, southern Spain. A black attaché is chained to the body's wrist, containing top-secret documents about an impending Allied invasion.
Everyone knows it's going to happen. Just where's the invasion of Europe going to come from?
But this is no ordinary body lost at sea. This is part of one of the most ambitious missions ever conducted by British intelligence. Operation Mincemeat.
Operation Mincemeat becomes the great Trojan horse of World War II. It's an absolutely essential mission that ends up saving thousands of Allied lives.
Devised and put into motion by Charles Cholmondeley and Ewan Montague, British intelligence agents working for MI5 in London. Their unparalleled attention to detail would be a major catalyst to the Allied victory.
The German war machine was so overwhelming to anyone who witnessed it that the Allies would have to depend on any means that they could to get an advantage over the Germans.
Espionage is a major part of the British war effort. They run a huge disinformation campaign, feeding fake leads about the military plans to the Nazis using double agents.
This is part of the war that we don't talk about very much. We focus on the battles and the invasions, but the war of the mind, we don't talk about. The idea of how do we fool the other side, creating false information that they think they are getting through espionage. So it's the double cross of it.
British intelligence had already cracked the Enigma code that the Germans used to send messages, deciphered by a team based in Bletchley Park, just northwest of London.
Interestingly, Bletchley Park isn't so much a place that respects or promotes military stripes, but much more, in fact, great minds.
Intelligence in this case is meant to give the people on the ground who are running the operation as much forewarning and foreknowledge as possible.
British intelligence uses the intercepted information to tailor upcoming espionage missions, which are discussed in MI5 committees. In 1942, 25-year-old Charles Christopher Cholmondeley is the secretary for the top-secret 20 Committee, the group in charge of overseeing double agents.
And the 20 is this incredibly fascinating interdepartmental committee that is responsible for managing one of the most essential programs of World War II, which is called the Double Cross. And they are responsible for managing at the top level this program that has turned German agents working in the United Kingdom, keeping the Germans totally unaware that they're now working for the Allies.
They meet every Thursday in MI5 offices at 58 James Street in London to discuss the double agent system and explore new deception plans.
Okay, there's a big emphasis from the get-go in British thinking on deceiving the enemy, that this is going to be a long war, it's going to be a war that is going to require thinking out of the box, ungentlemanly warfare, deception, unconventional methods.
So in many ways, it's like a chess game. It's not the person whose queen wins the game, it's using every piece to its best advantage. And the only way you do that in chess is because you get to look down from above and see how all the pieces on both sides are playing to plan ahead. When you can get to that level with your intelligence information in warfare, it provides you with a significant advantage, especially if your opponent doesn't have that same advantage.
Cholmondeley was a flight lieutenant in the Royal Air Force, seconded to the MI5 security service.
He was very short-sighted, so if you'd caught sight of him, very thick spectacles, weirdly shy, almost secretive. He was your quintessential English eccentric. His short-sightedness, a personal tragedy for him, obviously. He wants to be out there in a flying machine, didn't all the boys back in the day? It's actually a great boon, of course, for British intelligence, because instead they acquire his alternative, secretive mind.
At the beginning of the war, Rear Admiral John Godfrey, the Director of Naval Intelligence, circulated the Trout Memo. Although published under Godfrey's name, it bore all the hallmarks of his assistant. His name, Lieutenant Commander Ian Fleming, who would after the war become the famous novelist immortalizing British intelligence operations through the adventures of James Bond. He knows his commander is a keen angler, so he compares the deception of an enemy in wartime to fly fishing.
One of his sort of famous analogies is he says, you know, the fly fisherman must outsmart the trout, outsmart the fish, and makes the point, if you've been fishing in one place, you need to leave it a while because the trout's going to know you're there. Let's strip this back to basic human nature. What can we make the enemy believe?
What the Trout Memo is, it's exploring types of espionage. They developed literally a laundry list of ways of duping the Nazis.
October 31st, 1942, Charles Cholmondeley presents the idea of a Trojan horse to the 20 Committee, a plan to place falsified documents of a highly secret nature in the hands of the enemy using a decoy, a dead body.
There's two aspects to this mission. On the first point, what you need to do is trick the Germans. And the other very important thing is we know that the Germans have been tricked.
This idea that you can plant evidence on a body is totally new. It's actually something that Ian Fleming says can be seen as drastic. But in war, anything is drastic.
Cholmondeley's audacious idea lands on the desk of intelligence officer Ewan Montague. At this time, Montague has been briefed that this plan could be used by the Allies to deceive the Germans in a forthcoming operation in the Mediterranean.
And he was an intellect, he was a judge, he had a keen passion for yachting, which is how he ends up in the sort of volunteer naval division and then is promoted into naval intelligence.
Montague is teamed with Cholmondeley to develop the Trojan horse plan further.
For me, one of the things that I found most interesting was that they were able to sell this, and not to the Germans, but to their own side to move forward with it. I mean, it's a crazy idea.
Cholmondeley and Montague are a really interesting duo because they both love to read spy novels, they both love fiction. This is the opportunity to do something which would only be seen in a novel, and they'll go to tremendous lengths to make this work.
Where Cholmondeley was awkward but charming, Montague was smooth and refined. He was highly organized and attentive to details, the perfect complement to Cholmondeley's unusually imaginative brain. At this time, the British Army is also in the heat of action. Beginning October 23, 1942, the British Army attacks German forces at El Alamein in North Africa.
North Africa was the proving ground for the Allied war effort, going against Hitler's machine. It was a way for Allies to work together in that part of the world in a way they hadn't before.
The British 8th Army under General Bernard Montgomery is pushing for a victory. On November 4th, the Germans suffer a comprehensive defeat, which sparks the Allied invasion of North Africa, Operation Torch.
But very famously, Churchill says, this ain't the end. This isn't the beginning of the end even. This is the end of the beginning. But it's still a pivot point. We've got the upper hand now.
Troops begin to land near Casablanca, Oran, and Algiers, and form a large Allied army.
After losing North Africa, the Germans become highly aware that the invasion may come from North Africa to one of two locations. It's either going to be Italy or it's going to be Greece.
For the Allies, the best option is Sicily, the island situated just off the coast of Italy, which will give them a stepping stone into mainland Europe. Even Churchill remarked, "Anybody but a damn fool would know it was Sicily." In January of 1943, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill meet in the Anfa Hotel in Casablanca, French Morocco, to plan the next phase of the Allied attacks in World War II.
At the Casablanca conference, Franklin Roosevelt and Churchill start planning beyond North Africa. What's next? The question is, where in Southern Europe do we attack? Churchill and Roosevelt are working on a southern invasion of Europe, and the Allies want to hit Sicily. They're worried about casualties, so Operation Mincemeat is designed to make the Germans think that we're not going to attack in Sicily. The Allies are going to attack somewhere else. In this particular case, Greece.
The key to success to capturing Sicily is to convince the Germans that Greece is the intended target, hoping that troop numbers are then reduced on the island.
There is this kind of recognition in mid-1942 that we're not fighting the war in the same committed way that our enemy is. By this stage, by 1942-43, it's about winning. We're not in the position to match the enemy yet on continental Europe in a conventional military fashion. So we've got to think out of the box, and that might not be very nice.
With Operation Mincemeat now given a green light, Cholmondeley and Montagu need to act fast, as Cholmondeley's idea has gone from being theoretical to a full-blown mission. The first order of business is to find a fresh male body of military age with no obvious injuries or ailments.
The plot ultimately calls for a body at sea, supposedly to have been there through a plane crash. So now you need a body which is going to look at a particular stage of decomposition, consistent with somebody who died in a fairly recent air crash. And that's tricky.
You know, this guy needs to be intact, for want of a better expression, so that we can therefore fake the death, make it look like he's drowned. And that creates problems.
In times of war, scruples are somewhat useless because the aim of the people who are waging the war is to win it. And when we're speaking about a war with Hitler and his Nazis, we're speaking about an enemy who would not stop at anything. And so I think scruples were entirely unnecessary.
On January 28, 1943, Coroner Bentley Purchase alerts Ewan Montagu about a potential candidate for Operation Mincemeat in the St. Pancras Hospital morgue.
When you are alerted by the coroner, hey, we've got the guy for you, you are onto it pretty damn quickly. There's another reason, of course, why you've got to be onto it pretty damn quickly, because dead bodies deteriorate, and they deteriorate at the rate of knots, and we need our man floating in the sea to look like he's recently been drowned.
The body is identified as Glender Michael, a homeless Welshman whose body was found in an abandoned warehouse 2 days earlier. Cause of death is believed to be suicide by rat poison.
If this person died a certain way that doesn't coincide with how we want the body to be presented as dying, then it's not going to work.
The toxicology report performed by Purchase suggests that the rat poison will not be detected in a body that was in the water. To be sure the body won't betray the mission, Montagu consults with Sir Bernard Spilsbury, a world-leading forensic pathologist at that time. Spilsbury took a look at the body of Glender Michael and confirms this is a good selection. But it's not all good news. He tells Montagu that a body that is drowned will have telltale signs. Fine white froth would be found in the lungs and on the lips, water in the stomach, and foreign material like sand and vomit in the lungs, hemorrhages in the ear. This body has none of those markings, making this mission a risk.
And this was one of the biggest ways that the whole procedure may have failed. If you go through the autopsy, you could clearly tell that the body didn't drown. Then the rest of the story, like a house of cards, falls apart.
But time is against them, so Cholmondeley and Montagu take the risk.
Purchase cautions them that you're going to have to use the body quickly because, of course, decomposition sets in, and so they decide to keep the body on ice, and that buys them time.
You got to work with what you've got. That's war. It's all about compromise.
On February 4th, 1943, 1 week after the death of Glender Michael, Chumley and Montague present a draft of Operation Mincemeat to the 20 Committee, which passes.
What's at stake is massive, and that's where I can imagine if I was a senior commander hearing these two relatively unknown guys come up with a plan of this nature, I'd probably be hesitant too, because there's nothing short of the invasion plans of Southern Europe on the table.
The big guns have put their cross, their name, by this operation. That immediately, incidentally, raises the stakes. This isn't just some little hobby that a couple of eccentrics are having a go with in the double-cross committee. No, by now, there's big guns engaged in this idea, and it needs to succeed.
With official approval of their Trojan horse, Chumley and Montague have to change the story and character of Glender Michael.
Because the Germans are so thorough, you have to create a life from birth to death. So you have to think about, where was this person born? What was his family like? Did he have siblings? Who were his parents? What did his parents do for a living? You have to create this very elaborate life story for this person and create enough crumbs that the Germans are going to find that it is believable and it seems like a legitimate person.
Chumley and Montague decide to make their Trojan horse a member of the Royal Marines, since Operation Mincemeat originated in the Naval Military Operations Department. Naval officers always wear their uniforms when they travel and carry ID cards. This means that he needs to be outfitted properly, and a legitimate-looking ID card must be fabricated. But first things first, he needs a new name.
They are conscious of the fact that the Germans may have lists of senior commanders in various British departments, including the Royal Marines, which is ultimately the agency they decide upon. So anticipating that, they can't make up somebody that nobody's ever heard of. They have to take the identity of an existing officer, a real-life guy.
Searching through personnel files, they come across 9 high-ranking Marines with the surname Martin. And after careful research, they choose Major William Norrie Martin. At this time, the real Major Martin is in America, training Army personnel, so he is unlikely to find out what is being done with his name.
He didn't need to know about Operation Mincemeat. If you want to keep a secret, don't tell anyone.
With the real Major Martin across the Atlantic, Glender Michael is confidently renamed.
You can imagine William Martin's shock and surprise to find out that his identity had been usurped by a corpse, but that's the plan.
He's issued ID card number 148228 by the British Admiralty, directed by Louis Mountbatten. In order to cover their tracks, they mark the new identity card as a replacement to justify its fresh appearance.
You know the Germans are going to ask questions. You're covering that.
If they had been sloppy in organizing this person's character, the Nazis would have caught on right away.
To maintain authenticity, the ID card needs a photo, which poses another challenge to Chumley and Montague.
There's no actual photograph of this guy for them to use, and the only time that they could take a photograph of him, he's dead. So that is a very significant logistical problem that you have to overcome.
After a while of staring at their friends and acquaintances for a suitable look-alike, in March of 1943, Ronnie Reed, a former BBC technician and expert, is selected as the man to pose for Major Martin's photo ID card. Montague thinks the resemblance is so strong that they could be twins. In the St. Pancras mortuary, Chumley measures Major Martin to get the right-sized battle dress and boots. He goes to the military tailors to get a full uniform, complete with boots, braces, gaiters, trench coats, badges of rank, and a beret.
You can't have a pristine uniform on the body because then it looks like it's a plant. So this uniform has to be worn around for a while.
Being of similar height and build, Chumley wears Major Martin's uniform every day for 3 months to break it in. Now that Major Martin has an ID card and military garb to look the part, he needs a plausible backstory. Chumley and Montague decide that Major William Martin is the adored son of an upper-middle-class Welsh family, who is brilliant but forgetful. To establish this, Montague approaches Ernest Whitley Jones, the Joint General Manager of Lloyd's Bank, to write an angry letter about an overdraft. The letter is addressed to the Pall Mall Army and Navy Club, Martin's address when in town.
and the material on him was meant to be found and made accessible to the Germans, this person would have to have everything that a person normally has, which is a backstory. And it's the little details of the personal life which balance out the fact that there are clandestine or secret confidential documents with this person.
Cholmondeley and Montague decide Major Martin is engaged to a vivacious woman working in a government office. William had met Pam just 5 weeks earlier and proposed with an expensive diamond ring. His fictional father, John C. Martin, did not approve of the match.
And the story of his life, that's what you're kind of going for, is trying to get people to see him as a person instead of looking too closely as a body or as a ploy. Every detail that was used confirmed an earlier detail, so that you built up this long chain that at this point was almost unbreakable, that everything here should be believed, therefore the papers must be real too.
A receipt for Pam's engagement ring is added to William Martin's wallet, along with a flirtatious photograph. This photograph was actually of Jean Leslie, a 20-year-old working in the War Office to help intercept enemy spies. Love letters from Pam to Bill are also planted in the wallet, written by Jean Leslie's boss, Hester Leggett.
They even put eyelashes in some of the letters that are dropped in there to look like he hasn't opened the letter yet. It's almost like a mad scientist way of doing spycraft. They're building someone up from nothing.
Because of their positions of relative power and intelligence, they can call in on very specific levels of assistance.
To ensure William Martin's backstory is consistent, Cholmondeley carefully gathers supporting items that a wartime officer might carry in his pockets, what could be referred to as wallet litter. Contained within is a booklet of stamps, a pencil stub, keys, a pack of Players Navy-cut cigarettes and matches, and a used 2-penny bus ticket. But there's still the problem that if there's a post-mortem, it will clearly show Martin never drowned. But Montague and Cholmondeley have a plan to hopefully prevent a full autopsy from happening.
So they made Major Martin a Catholic and put a cross on the body. So when it was discovered to respect the Catholic faith, they didn't do the type of intensive autopsy that they otherwise would have.
With Major Martin's personality fleshed out, it is time to develop his role in military operations. It is decided that Martin is a courier, carrying an attaché containing confidential personal letters between high-ranking Allied officials. Building on the Allied Army's success in North Africa, it is decided that the first fake letter from Major Martin's briefcase will be sent from General Sir Archibald Nye in Britain to General Sir Harold Alexander in Tunisia. These two generals are privy to highly classified battle plans, and the Germans will know who they are. For authenticity's sake, General Nye drafts the letter himself.
If you're the British, there's a very high probability that the Germans have seen letters written by General Nye before. So they know how he writes. They know the voice he uses. So it's a really smart decision to have him write the letter himself so that whatever those little unconscious tendencies that you have when you're writing come through.
The letter indicates there are 2 assaults planned: the bombing of airfields in Sardinia, codename Operation Brimstone, and an Allied invasion of Greece, Operation Husky. In fact, Brimstone only existed on paper, and Operation Husky's true objective was the island of Sicily. The hope is that if Germans find anything else called Husky, they'll believe it is about an attack on Greece.
Nobody other than a very small group knew all the details or would see how all the pieces fit together. And you'd only do that if you're really afraid that there were double agents or German spies that had infiltrated British command.
Information about military attacks is typically shared over wireless, using coded messages. But for Operation Mincemeat to work, the body needs to have written documents planted on it for the enemy to discover. To dispel any questions about why a courier is carrying such confidential information about upcoming military attacks, the letters in Major Martin's briefcase need to be considered personal, written with just enough informality.
It has to be believable for the Nazis to respond to it. Everything has to look right. If something is off, then the whole mission fails.
With Major Martin's meticulous backstory and falsified military plans complete, Cholmondeley and Montague now need to choose the best spot to drop the body, where it is sure to land in the right hands and make its way up to Hitler in Germany. British intelligence decide on neutral Spain, where the country was led by right-wing dictator General Franco.
Spain depended on the United States and to some extent did not want to anger the United Kingdom. So it was ostensibly neutral. Franco's neutrality cannot be really taken at face value because we know that the Nazis and Mussolini fought on Franco's side during the Spanish Civil War. So we know that Franco was a sympathizer to a limited extent with what was going on in Germany.
But to pinpoint an exact location, they need someone well connected on the ground.
It's got to be tough. Who do you know who to trust?
Montague and Chumley meet with Don Gomez Baer, a British Navy captain who has a large Spanish network. He advises that the best place to launch a dead body into German hands is Huelva, a fishing port off the Spanish coast. It is home to a large German community where the chief of police is very pro-German, but it has one very important German resident.
They were targeting a very specific member of the German spy network, somebody who was highly trusted, highly ranked, and who had a lot of connections in the area that they're dropping off the body.
This is Adolf Claus, a Nazi spy that's made Huelva his home. Supposedly there under the guise as an agricultural technician, he was an efficient and effective operative for the Abwehr, a German equivalent of Britain's MI5.
If you can convince him that this is a real lucky opportunity, then anything he passes back towards Germany is going to be taken from a trusted source.
In 1943, Claus is running the largest and most efficient spy ring in Spain. If anything of importance washes up near Huelva, Claus will surely hear about it.
The Abwehr was everywhere. I mean, agents were spanning the globe because Germany was very invested in maintaining the support of the nations which had not joined the Allies. They needed some kind of neutral powers where they could collect information about Allied activity, and they would stop at nothing to get what they needed.
After choosing Huelva as the target location, British intelligence decides that rather than being dropped from an airplane, it's best to release the body of Major William Martin into the ocean by submarine.
This body just has to appear. What's a great way to do that along a coastline? Utilize a submarine, because the submarine can be silent, it can come to the surface at night, drop off whatever needs dropped off, and then go back underwater and escape. Because if you're spotted dropping it, it's game over. Everything is for nothing.
At this moment, the HMS Seraph is docked in the port of Greenock, Scotland. This submarine was specifically designed to patrol the restricted waters of the North Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. It is captained by Richard Jewell, who can be relied upon for discretion.
Yeah. You can't underestimate the importance of secrecy. I mean, there's double agents everywhere. And nobody knows that more than Chumley. Why? Because he is an integral part of the Double Cross Committee. It's all about controlling double agents, in some cases triple agents. Who do you trust in war?
But there's a problem. The body of General Martin is in London, and the submarine is in Scotland. So they need to come up with a way to covertly move the body and avoid further decomposition during transportation. However, they know just the man for the job. Charles Fraser Smith is the master of disguising ordinary objects. After working in different positions abroad, he returns to the UK to design clothing, props, and gadgetry for British intelligence. He is Ian Fleming's inspiration for Q, the gadget expert in the James Bond series. Fraser Smith is tasked with creating a canister to transport the body, the world's first underwater corpse transfer.
So how do they keep the body from decomposing? If it's completely decomposed, the Germans wouldn't believe it was real or credible.
And they devise a plan to put this body on dry ice in a large steel container and take the oxygen out of it. So you need oxygen to decompose.
Fraser Smith works with Charles Chumley to draw up blueprints for a tubular canister, 6 feet 6 inches long. One end will be welded closed, and the other has an airtight steel lid and a box wrench is clipped to the lid to make for easy removal. Throughout design and construction, Fraser Smith isn't told what the canister is for, and when requested to add a Mae West life jacket, he's told it's for a floating weather station, though the life jacket makes it clear this isn't the real reason.
Information on a need-to-know basis. The more you know, the more potential you have to compromise the mission.
Secrecy is key, but before the body has left London, there is one more hurdle to be faced and the chance for the operation to be exposed, as all MI5 secret activities need approval from British Parliament before being put into action. On April 13th, 1943, the British Parliament's Chief of Staff Committee gathered to approve the falsified military letters for Operation Mincemeat.
You don't have a lot of time. The Nazis continue to build their fortifications along the coast and even further inland. At some point, it's going to be perhaps impossible to do this.
Churchill needs to give final approval.
Churchill knows that we can't have a conventional war, not until the enemy's been really weakened. So there's got to be thinking out of the box.
April 15th at 10:15, Churchill officially signs off.
Now many people in Parliament know what is going on, and that could be a significant hindrance to the secrecy of this. That's probably one of the most nerve-wracking parts for the intelligence operation.
A few hours later, General Dwight Eisenhower also gives his approval for the operation. After all, it's going to be his troops leading the landing on Sicily, and will need Operation Mincemeat to be a success. With all the necessary approvals in tow, the body of Major Martin is ready for final preparations. After Cholmondeley and Montague dress him, Martin is transferred to Hackney Mortuary, where Fraser Smith's canister is waiting. Next stop is the port of Greenock. But to get the canister there, Cholmondeley and Montague enlist the help of an intelligence officer who was a former racing driver.
To make the story all the more fascinating, the person selected to transport the body is a famous race car driver with the unusual name of Jock Horsfall. And to make that more interesting is he's basically legally blind.
He lives life on the edge, often refusing to wear a helmet or protective clothing, preferring to drive in stylish suits. It is widely speculated that Ian Fleming borrowed many of Horsfall's traits for James Bond. His reputation as a tight-lipped daredevil grabs the attention of British intelligence, who recruit him as a special agent during World War II.
This is a piece of evidence showing how this was a total war, and everybody wanted to get on board and do whatever they could. So being told, you're helping us fight the Nazis doing this, that's an easy sell.
For Operation Mincemeat, he needs to drive 420 miles from London to the Greenock Scottish Naval Yard with a specially constructed canister full of dry ice in tow.
Time is not on our side, and we have thousands of people who want to open up a second front. He's already encased, ready to go, but now we have to understand that this has to get to the dock quickly.
But Operation Mincemeat's importance goes beyond Sicily. At this time on the Eastern Front, Russia's Red Army are fighting Nazis tooth and nail to hold on to the Ukrainian city of Kharkov. In March of 1943, the Red Army loses control of the city to the Nazis and are then pushed back over 160 kilometers. After the Red Army loses this battle, they begin to rebuild their forces to prepare for a major offensive. All Russian males, even male children, are called to fortify the Russian forces.
The Red Army is a massive nightmare for the Nazis.
If the Allies are to be successful on the Eastern Front, it will require Operation Mincemeat to convince Germany to divert forces to Greece.
The more troops that are moving around on the German side, the more that they have to reposition people, the better it is for you as you're making these plans.
Back in London, with time running out, Jock Horsfall knows the perfect vehicle to drive the canister to Greenock, a large 1937 Fordson van that he uses to transport his racing vehicles. On April 19th, 1943, the canister is loaded into Horsfall's Fordson just after midnight. Around 2 a.m., Cholmondeley and Montague buckle up tight as Horsfall races against time.
Pray to the big man you're going to get up to Greenock in one piece, because I'm telling you what, that was not guaranteed with Horsfall at the helm.
Horsfall comes within inches of totaling his 3,400-pound Fordson several times.
At this point, they just want the body to get there.
That morning, after their harrowing ride, Horsfall, Cholmondeley, and Montague arrive at Greenock Dock. Here, the crew of the submarine help them load the canister onto the vessel, but are not told what's in it. On April 19th at 1600 hours, after 3 full months of crafting their fictional character, Chumley and Montague bid the fictional Major Martin goodbye, hoping to fool the Germans against all odds.
Everything is in motion now.
For two people who have controlled every little detail of this has got to be stressful. It's out of your hands. You got to hope for the best, and you hope you get a message back at some point.
The HMS Seraph slips out of the moorings and sails out from the port of Greenock.
They had served off the coast of North Africa. They've been in the Battle of the Atlantic. They know what combat is like. They understand their previous missions and understand the importance of every mission, even though most of the crew don't know what's going on with this canister that's now showed up on board.
On April 30th, the HMS Seraph stealthily approaches the shores of Huelva in southern Spain.
So there are U-boats everywhere. So the decision to launch this body underwater, there's a lot of risk in that.
2 hours later, they reach the drop spot off the Porral Pillar, but where the body should be released are fishing boats. It's a tense wait for them to leave. Once the coast is clear, 3 men on board the Seraph hold the canister up through the torpedo hatch. The body of Major Martin is lifted out of the steel tube.
After a 10-day journey under the ocean, the body is going to be relinquished to the seven seas in the hope that it washes ashore in suitably German sympathetic southwest Spain and is handed on up the food chain, arriving, of course, at German intelligence. But there's lots that could possibly go wrong.
At 4:30, when the HMS Seraph is practically aground, the body is dropped off the coast of Huelva before the submarine disappears out of sight. Now, back in London, Chumley and Montague are nervously waiting for news.
That must have been an excruciating time for them as they waited for word of what happened.
Just a few hours after being jettisoned from the submarine, the body of Major Martin washes ashore. A local fisherman discovers it just 14 kilometers from Huelva.
What's going to happen to the documents? Are they going to end up in the right place or not?
That's the hope, that one cadaver, one extraordinary, cleverly laid trap will reel in a whole shoal of fish for the Allied forces.
Based on the uniform, the fisherman knows this is a man of military importance. The body, along with the chained attaché, are rushed to the morgue cemetery in Huelva. The next day, the autopsy of Major William Martin by Dr. Fernandez is scheduled. Since this was the body of a British soldier, the Spanish authorities contacted Francis Haselden, the British Vice Consul, to oversee the proceedings. Haselden knew that this body was a crucial part of a larger British strategy. Dr. Fernandez goes through the pockets and puts everything on the table beside the locked attaché case. All of the items Chumley and Montague have painstakingly chosen for the fictional Major Martin. Then the briefcase is opened. The contents are soaked, but the writing on the envelopes is still legible. Haselden examines the names and the letters and registers their importance. The Spaniards offered the case and its contents to Haselden, but Haselden declined, requesting that the handover go through formal channels. Possibly a suspicious move on his part, but essential. The letters from the briefcase are then passed on to the Spanish Navy. Though most of Spain is pro-German, the Spanish Navy is actually fairly pro-British, the most out of all of neutral Spain's military divisions. However, the top German spy in Spain, Adolf Claus, has heard about the dead British officer's body being washed up with potentially important documents on him.
People who are working in the spy network are trying to show their worth. And if you provide information that ends up being used, then often there are rewards for you in the system. And then lo and behold, here's some of the best key intelligence. Everybody's going to want to pass it on and want to believe it.
But with the letters in the Navy's possession, it becomes increasingly more challenging for him to get his hands on them, putting Operation Mincemeat in jeopardy.
The Abwehr, of course, is very, very impatient. But the Spaniards have to follow the procedures. They cannot allow it to be seen as if their sovereignty is being challenged by the Germans, or as if they are not in fact neutral, but have some kind of back channel to the Abwehr. That would have exposed that neutrality to be false.
Cholmondeley and Montagu's plan to avoid a full autopsy by making Major Martin Catholic has failed, as the Spanish doctor decides to conduct a full one. But Haselden has hung around to try to stop this from happening. Haselden knows a few details about Operation Mincemeat, but understands that the more rigorous the autopsy, the likelihood the doctor will find the real cause of death, which is not drowning. Dr. Fernandez is competent and familiar with drowning, since Huelva is a coastal city. He examines the lungs, which have fluid in them, but he is unsure if this is water. Haselden takes matters into his own hands, saying that the extremely hot day has done enough damage to the body, and he is satisfied with the autopsy. Dr. Fernandez relents and issues the death certificate.
With a typical military operation, you know the results almost in real time of what is happening. With this, you don't. They have a long wait before they know if their plan has been successful. That wait time must have been excruciating.
On May 2nd, 1943, the official military burial for Major William Martin is held. Many esteemed guests attend, including the British Vice Consul Haselden, along with the British Navy Captain Don Gomez-Bear.
So Glyndwr Michael dies twice. A homeless Welshman ends up getting a full military funeral and honors at a burial in Spain as a Royal Marine.
Haselden and Captain Gomez-Bear notice Adolf Claus watching the funeral processions in the shadows.
We know that Adolf Claus has been tipped off and is across what's going on.
Klaus is very interested in figuring out who this is, what's the importance of these documents, and notifying the proper channels, because that ensures that he has a job, that he stays safe, and that he has status in this system. Someone has taken the bait.
Now that the briefcase is in the hands of the Spanish Navy, London and the British Embassy in Madrid need to become increasingly agitated about the top-secret documents that are inside.
Deception only works if everyone plays their part. If they had shown indifference towards the material found on this deceased major's person, it would have rung alarm bells saying, why are they disinterested? Why are they treating it as if this was a laundry list or just some random memo?
From Huelva, Haselden communicates with the embassy in Madrid. Cables from London are also sent pointing out the urgency of these documents to be returned.
One of the worst things that could happen is if in asking for it back, Spain says, okay, sure, here you go.
The British allow their false retrieval attempts to be intercepted by the Germans, and their fake desperation fools Claus and the Abwehr, who become desperate to get their hands on copies of these letters. 3 days have passed since Major Martin's funeral on May 2nd. Adolf Claus still knows nothing of what those sealed military documents say.
The Abwehr is kind of like this secondary arm of the intelligence wing. They don't get as much funding. They're not seen as being as elite, quote unquote, as the SS intelligence arm is. This is a huge deal. Finding this body, Klaus could put the Abwehr on a different level now by saying, I know where they're going to invade, here's the documents.
With no progress being made, Wilhelm Canaris, the head of the Abwehr headquarters in Berlin, is forced to get involved. He is a well-connected admiral and leans heavily on his Spanish naval connections to access the contents of the letters. This is nearly a full week after Claus learned of their existence, an embarrassing failure for the German agent.
Lo and behold, Klaus is given access to the briefcase. He makes copies of the important documents and sends them up the chain of command.
They are taken so seriously that they are sent to Berlin. You're not going to pick up the phone and call and say, I have intelligence that the Allies are going to invade Greece. That has to be sent straight to Berlin, straight to the intelligence offices.
The letters are passed to Fremde Heere West, also known as the FHW, which is the linchpin of the German military intelligence.
They know almost everything going on the continent. They have spies everywhere. They have informants. The Gestapo is working overtime to try to find out counterinsurgency plots, enemies of the state. They're locking down Europe. It is going to be hard to break through and fool them into thinking that this is what's going to happen.
There is a high level of paranoia in the German state. In any dictatorial society, you are second-guessing yourself, because you put a step wrong, it's game over.
Based on the letter's contents, it determines they have 2 to 3 weeks to reinforce the Greek coast before the Allies attack.
It has to be fully trusted before it gets to Hitler. And at any point along that chain, if somebody doesn't believe in it, then the whole mission fails.
There's a lot of anxiety on the British side. What's happened to the intelligence? Do they believe it?
The decision is made. Hitler is to receive this intel. Operation Mincemeat has made its way to the top German commander. On May 12th, the Bletchley Park offices in London intercept a German message. It states an enemy invasion on a large scale is projected in the near future in both East and West Mediterranean. But has Germany taken the bait? Or is this an attempt to deceive the Allies?
How do you know the Germans have fallen for this ruse?
It's very possible that if Mincemeat goes wrong, you're going to be walking into a trap. And the trap being, it's always tough to have a landing from the ocean. If you are caught on those beaches, you're going to have high casualties, and then it's really hard to get out of there.
If the Germans figure this out, it is mass casualties for thousands and thousands of Allied soldiers.
Finally, Cholmondeley and Montagu receive a crucial update on the outcome of their deception plan.
With Cholmondeley and Montagu's letter in hand, Hitler issues a decree, and 90,000 German soldiers are sent to Greece to dig in at great expense, with fortifications constructed to prepare for the Allied invasion of Greece, which doesn't happen.
But once Hitler has said yes, there was no one in the entire National Socialist military establishment who was going to question him.
That's the golden prize, because that means that they've bought the deception plan.
At Bletchley Park, they intercept plenty of German communiques, giving them a clear-cut idea of what German defenses look like in Sicily. The coast will be armed with 300,000 troops defending 600 miles of coastline. More than two-thirds are Italians who are poorly trained and ill-equipped for this attack.
Many of the troops in Sicily, their heart is not in the effort anymore, and that will show when the Allies do invade.
Then on July 9th, 1943, the Allies launch Operation Husky, an attack on Sicily. This is the culmination of all their efforts from Operation Mincemeat. 2 American and 2 British airborne troops carry out attacks just after midnight. In the early hours of July 10th, the amphibious assault begins their landings, spread along 105 miles of the southern and eastern coasts of the island. British and Canadian forces are in the east, and Americans are towards the west.
It's a smash and grab. Within 6 weeks or so, we are now the occupying force, and we've got the perfect landing stage via which to launch into that so-called soft underbelly, in fact, very tough gut that is Italy. And it's very important that that initial operation into Sicily isn't too costly, because the Italian war is.
The attack opens up the Mediterranean sea lanes for Allied forces.
Think of how many lives are saved by that movement from the Allied side. If 90,000 or 100,000 Germans had been left on the Italian frontier, it would have been a bog of epic proportions.
Although having been caught out, on August 6, 1943, German troops pour into Italy to shut down any possibility of a peace treaty. But all that extra manpower means they have to loosen their grip on the Eastern Front, and they begin to withdraw from Russia and Ukraine.
If you're being attacked so hard by the Soviets on one side, and now you're being pushed hard from Sicily, you have a two-front war, and this pincer movement is starting to push in. And that means that you can't move troops from the Eastern Front to Italy, and vice versa, because they're both necessary and needed to keep the operation going. So you can't utilize your interior lines anymore, and this causes a major problem for Nazi Germany.
With the Nazi troops withdrawing from the Eastern Front, the Red Army now has the numbers to move to a crucial offensive.
It's not looking pretty for Germany. You've got the Americans who've come into the war on the Western Front, and you've got the extraordinary capacity of Russia to absorb German firepower that had not been anticipated.
Back on the Western Front, on July 25, 1943, Benito Mussolini is arrested. Less than 2 weeks later, Italy indicates there may be potential to sign a peace treaty.
Fascist Italy falls in a very short amount of time. So now the Germans have another worry. Now their ally to the south is knocked out of the war.
On September 8th, the surrender of Italy to the Allies is announced by General Eisenhower, and then by the Italian government and the Badoglio Proclamation. Operation Husky is a success. If Operation Mincemeat hadn't convinced the Germans to pull troops from Sicily, the Allies may never have captured it. On the Eastern Front, Operation Mincemeat's success gives Russia an upper hand on German forces.
Without as many German troops on the Eastern Front, it allows the Red Army to march in and make progress towards moving toward Germany.
On August 23rd, the Russians win the Battle of Kursk, the largest tank battle in history. This marks the decisive end of German offensives on the Eastern Front, paving the way for the massive Soviet offensives in 1944 and 1945 that will end in Berlin's capture and the Nazis' defeat.
Everyone was driven by a sense of desperation to end the war, and Operation Mincemeat certainly expedited the German defeat.
What I still can't get my brain around is that MI5 allowed these two young 20-somethings, Chumley and Montague, to just run with this seemingly farcical idea of planting evidence on a dead body, and they were given free rein to run with this mission, and it ended up working.
War is fought on the ground, certainly, but it is also fought at home. It's fought in intelligence. It's fought in the mind.
And what Operation Mincemeat is, it's an example of being given the space to think outside the box, being given the freedom to come up with a solution that's literally going to outsmart your enemy. And in the end, bring this god-awful conflict to a quicker finish.
Both Chumley and Montague were given honors for their part in the successful mission, but they weren't the only ones. In 1998, a new inscription was added to the gravestone of General William Martin, recognizing the part that Glender Michael had played in Operation Mincemeat, a man who helped change the course of World War II, and in his death, saved the lives of thousands more. On May 5, 1945, during the final days of World War II in Western Austria, a small group of American soldiers formed an unlikely alliance with members of the German army to protect the lives of French politicians and VIPs who have been imprisoned in a medieval castle.
This is the most unlikely battle by the most ragtag, eclectic mix of fighters in military history, yet alone World War II.
Attacked by elite SS troops, this band of unlikely brothers, outnumbered and outgunned, would fight one of the craziest battles of the Second World War, in a fight for their lives and the lives of the French prisoners.
These Frenchmen want the end of the war. Of course, they want free France. They want to get back into the country that they love. But they know before they do, they have to survive.
In 1925, Adolf Hitler becomes the leader of the re-established Nazi Party. After the stock market crash of 1929, Germany is destitute. Hitler capitalizes on that and becomes Chancellor of Germany in 1933, taking control of the state.
Hitler comes along and is very good at blame-mongering, scapegoating, playing the us versus them card. And the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and really he rode that all the way to power in 1933.
The Dachau camp, just north of Munich, is set up in March of that year to incarcerate political opponents. But as the Nazis ramp up their heinous racial agenda and Jewish people are arrested en masse, Dachau morphs into a detention site to commit mass murder.
These are not people known for their moral qualms about killing. There was no paperwork generally associated with this process. These processes took place, under the cover of darkness, as it were, and they were sort of, designed for maximum efficiency more than anything else.
In 1938, Austria is the first country to be annexed to Germany. 105,000 troops of the German 8th Army arrive on March 12, 1938.
Austria is Hitler's home. And when the Reich came together in the 1870s, they had this idea that Austria was a part of the German Reich. So it was always seen by old school traditional Germans as part of the German nation. So when Hitler does come to power and they begin to progress forward as a nation, he decides we are going to take part, and all later, of Austria.
The Reichsfuhrer himself, Heinrich Himmler, Hitler's right-hand man, leads the troops to the pacification of Austria. Himmler is particularly taken with the mountainous Tyrolean region, which he views as a potential Alpine fortress.
I think it's the sort of fairy tale version that we know the likes of Hitler and Himmler buy into, these kind of remote fortresses that exemplify German prowess.
A remote medieval castle captures his attention, Castle Itter. He leases the castle from the first deputy governor of Tyrol, though its initial purpose is unknown.
If you're Himmler, this is a spot where you could potentially envision yourself controlling this region, pulling the strings. It's possible that the rumors of a Nazi fortification are a result of the secretive nature of the Nazi Party and how protective they were of information. It could also be just part of the sensationalism that existed surrounding the Nazis in the late 1930s.
As the Nazis gain more power, they continue to expand the Reich's borders. The Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia, with a large ethnic German population, is annexed to Germany in 1938 as part of the Munich Agreement signed by European leaders, including French Prime Minister Édouard Daladier, an agreement to prevent another war in Europe. But Hitler is not done with Germany's expansion. To house the growing number of political opponents and those that were deemed racially inferior civilians, the Nazis build more concentration camps to take the burden off of Dachau. Sachsenhausen opens in 1936. Buchenwald opens in 1937. Ravensbrück, originally an all-female camp, opens in May 1939. As with Dachau, they all have isolated areas where VIP prisoners are segregated from the horrors of the rest of the camps.
There were some camps, Ravensbrück and elsewhere, for the French, some for Scandinavians. There were camps just for women. There were camps for homosexuals, camps for Jews, so they were segregated. But in the Dachau complex, there's a camp for high-ranking political prisoners, and I mean high-ranking political prisoners, ambassadors, former heads of state.
With the invasion of Poland by German forces, in September of 1939, World War II breaks out. 2 days later, England and France declare war on Germany.
The Germans will invade first from the west, the Russians a few weeks later from the east, and between the two of them they will conquer Poland, and both sides are responsible for unspeakable atrocities.
Meanwhile in France, now on a war footing, French Prime Minister Daladier, along with his top military official, Maurice Gamelin, start to build up their forces, but decide to minimize potential French losses by going on the defensive rather than offensive. He faces major criticism for his passive behavior towards Germany by the French public and his most virulent political rival, Paul Reynaud, who had opposed the Munich Agreement. The decision made by Daladier and Gamelin would ultimately lead to France's occupation. Germany begins their campaign against France on March 10, 1940. The French are taken by surprise as the Germans attack from central Belgium, which Gamelin believes is an impossible feat. The French front is breached in only 5 days.
They take France, and by June of 1940, they have secured most of Western Europe, right? They've taken the Netherlands, the Benelux countries, Belgium, Luxembourg, they've taken Denmark, they'll take Norway as well. So in effect, by the fall of 1940, the war has been won.
Facing massive public scrutiny and disapproval, Daladier resigns on March 21, 1940, and is replaced by his arch-political opponent, Reynaud. Gamelin is unable to redeem himself in Reynaud's eyes, and is replaced on May 18, 1940, by General Maxime Weygand, a seasoned military commander from World War I. But it's too late, and France falls into German control.
The important footnote to that, the fly in the ointment, is the United Kingdom, which of course still has punch, it still has fight. And what the Germans realize is that if they don't take it out, not only is their victory incomplete, but they leave potentially a staging ground should the United States get involved in the war. And that's a big if, because the United States is a neutral country, but Germany is not clueless.
With France's defeat, General Weygand advises the French government to capitulate, but Prime Minister Reynaud refuses. But with the backing of the cabinet, Reynaud's Deputy Marshal Pétain sides with Weygand. And on June 15th, the French government approached Germany about the cessation of active hostilities. Reynaud resigns the next day, and Pétain succeeds him to form the Vichy regime, a puppet government in German-controlled France.
It would be safe to call it a puppet government. It is doing what the people in Berlin want it to do. It is not going to resist or put up much of a fight to anything that is coming out of Berlin.
The Germans also allow the French to keep a small, limited force called the Armistice Army under the control of the Vichy government. Oppositions to the regime are imprisoned and handed over to the Germans, including former Prime Ministers Léon Blum, who was leader of France for a year in 1936, his successor, Edouard Daladier, as well as General Gamelin.
They were taken to various camps, various detention facilities, and these were the people who were the VIPs in these facilities, the people who the Germans were rightly aware of how important they were as political tools and ways to engage with the Allies potentially and gain leverage in the diplomatic side of the war.
But these may not be secure enough facilities for such high-profile captives.
They have a value, as long as they're alive. You know, it's like, why don't you kill your hostage? Because he might be useful to you. He's no good dead. That's the thinking in Germany. You know, there's an affection for some of these political leaders, and also they're reviled in a landscape where there's going to be a desperate scrabble to try and reinvent Europe. Hitler knows that.
But opposition is far from stamped out in France. To stop open opposition to the Reich, Hitler signs the Nacht und Nebel Act in 1941.
It's basically a tactic of night and fog. And the tactic is to get rid of perceived enemies of National Socialism.
About 200,000 French residents are secretly deported to Germany for being political activists against the Nazi regime.
The Nazis loved to pose as legal actors in the sense that they would always cover their misdeeds by passing a law first.
Many wind up in concentration camps, but the French resistance movement is growing.
Initially, those resistance movements take all shapes. Perhaps they're resisting arrest. Perhaps they're resisting by handing out flyers. Perhaps they're resisting by trying to kill someone. There are different forms of resistance at that time. However, it pops up organically.
In January of 1942, now exiled in the United Kingdom, French army officer and statesman Charles de Gaulle tries to unite the different groups by positioning himself as a leader of them all.
De Gaulle is trying to lead their effort from afar, from Britain. And that's not working out as well as planned in the early days.
De Gaulle meets up with French resistance fighter Jean-Pierre Moulin, a former civil servant who has made his way to Britain. De Gaulle gave Moulin an assignment of coordinating and unifying the various resistance groups and accept de Gaulle as their leader of his Free France movement. Moulin secretly returns to France.
They also have to worry about the issue of who's with who in France.
France is in chaos as the Nazis have complete control of Petain's puppet Vichy regime. Major French political figures are about to be put on trial. On February 19, 1942, the WWII trials begin as an attempt by the Vichy regime to prove that the former leaders of France are responsible for the country's defeat by Germany in 1940.
This was done in a French court. This was done by a French government. Therefore, it is legitimate. If it's done either in Berlin or explicitly by Germans, it doesn't have any sense of legitimacy with the people.
The secondary aim is to force France to accept responsibility for the war. Léon Blum, Edouard Daladier, and Maurice Gamelin all stand trial.
So you want to present to them that this is all within a French culture, within the French legal system, and that it's all taking place and it's all above board.
The Germans' plan backfired. Although Gamelin refused to engage in the trial, the defense put forward by Blum and Daladier were largely successful in rebutting the charges and won sympathetic coverage in the international press. Hitler orders the trial suspension to stop further embarrassment, although Blum, Daladier, and Gamelin were returned to prison. And so France falls into a lengthy period of effective German occupation with no end in sight. With much of mainland Europe now under Nazi control, they go about fortifying the Atlantic Wall's extensive system of defenses and fortifications along the coasts of continental Europe and Scandinavia. After 3 years of Nazi expansion, finally, the Allies hit back and seized the offensive. On November 8, 1942, the Americans and the British launched Operation Torch to take Morocco and Algeria, who at this time were French colonies aligned with Germany via Vichy France.
Operation Torch is the invasion of North Africa. It is done by all the Allied armies in the Western Hemisphere. And their goal is to disintegrate the power bloc in North Africa.
The French Army of Africa switched their allegiance from the Vichy regime to Free France, led by Charles de Gaulle. This is the first major operation carried out as a joint effort by the Allies, and a notable setback for the Nazis. Back in France, the Germans retaliate and occupy the whole of the country, disbanding the Armistice Army of Vichy and move French political prisoners.
The VIPs of Dachau are to be sent to a new place, an alpine retreat called Castle Itter.
On November 23, 1942, just days after the Allied invasion of North Africa, Hitler signs an order to acquire Schloss Itter, Castle Itter outright, to be used for special SS prisoners.
There's something in that that makes them feel both powerful and safe, and I don't think it's a coincidence that this particular Schloss was selected.
Himmler seizes it from the current owner to transform it into the most high-profile sub-camp of the concentration camp system under Dachau's control.
It's a chaotic scene in all the places where Nazis have taken over. A lot of political prisoners are being rounded up, people who are suspected of being not Nazi sympathizers. They're being picked up off the streets regularly.
As more German troops are now in France, on December 1st of 1942, a new French resistance group is founded, recognizing General Henri Giraud as France's leader, which is backed by the United States and operates out of North Africa. However, Winston Churchill supports Charles de Gaulle as the leader of Free France, as he's been running operations in England since the invasion of France.
The situation, it intensifies with more German troops there, with more Nazi officials there to take greater control of the country. I think part of it certainly is a response to what happens in Africa, but then the other part of it too is a recognition that Allied forces are building up and that an invasion is going to come.
As the resistance movement is finding its footing, high-profile French citizens are seized by the Nazis, including relatives of both Giraud and de Gaulle. They will be moved to Castle Itter after its conversion into an upscale prison. On February 8, 1943, a small group of concentration camp prisoners from Dachau and Flossenburg arrived to convert Castle Itter into a VIP detention facility.
What's going to happen is this Schloss Itter will become the most high-profile sub-camp under the administration of Dachau. By May 1943, so in the wake of what's unfolded in North Africa and the full occupation of France, you now have these big political scalps being moved into one place, a sort of revamped, top-notch prison. As prisons go, this ain't such a bad place to be. They've got a courtyard, they've got reasonable food, but the SS and this Himmler make sure that it's a special SS camp and it's properly guarded. Pretty sinister.
They make a dormitory for 35 SS troops, an arms room filled with weapons behind heavily locked doors, offices, and private suites for the SS commanders and administration workers, and even a modest medical facility.
It becomes this location where the French elite is eventually pulled together from various locations and put there.
On May 2nd, 1943, the first VIP prisoners arrive at Castle Itter from Buchenwald. Former French Premier Edouard Daladier, his former general Maurice Gamelin, and labor union leader Léon Jouot. 8 days later, more prisoners arrive. Jean Bouratra, a tennis star who served as the sports commissioner for Vichy before denouncing the regime, and former PM Paul Reynaud. Though they've been in separate prisons for years, Daladier and Reynaud remain as hostile as ever towards each other.
You talk about politicians not being able to compromise or break bread. Well, they're not even in a Nazi prison camp.
On June 19, 1943, Augusta Bruclin arrives, Léon Jouot's long-term partner. Her French resistance activities lead to her arrest and imprisonment. On July 2nd, 2 more prisoners arrive. Christiane Mabir is the former secretary of Paul Reynaud and his future wife. The other, Marcel Granger, is the son-in-law of General Henri Giraud, leader of the Free French Fighting Forces in Africa. As the number of French VIP prisoners increases in Castle Itter, the French foes segregate themselves based on political views and avoid each other as much as possible.
Politics sure as heck didn't stop during the war or even imprisonment. This castle is a hotbed of political animosities and political maneuvering and political debate. It's as if a lot of these high-ranking former leaders, it's as if they thought they were still in office or something, because they continue to fight politically over everything.
With the tides of war turning heavily against the Nazis as Allied bombing increases in Europe, hitting deep into the heart of Germany, Berlin and the Germans defeat in Stalingrad, Himmler begins plotting a secret peace deal with the Allies.
The very heart of the SS starts to believe that maybe he can sway things a different direction for Nazi Germany. Maybe he can have a unique way to get what Nazi Germany wants.
But despite his attempts, American President Franklin D. Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill will not engage.
And Heinrich Himmler is doing all of this behind the back of Adolf Hitler.
Meanwhile at Castle Itter, to ensure the well-being of the VIP prisoners, various labor prisoners are also there to perform maintenance duties. One in particular, electrician Zvonimir Kukovic, becomes friendly with the French VIPs and manages to sneak in a contraband radio so they can have access to BBC war updates. This proves to be extremely useful, especially as Allied victories begin to dominate the airwaves.
In England, General Dwight D. Eisenhower and his deputy commanders chart the liberation of a lost continent.
The day finally arrives, June 6, 1944, D-Day. The Allies launch a combination of naval, air, and land assaults in Nazi-occupied France. The massive force consists of over 150,000 soldiers.
It is the D-Day. There were many D-Days around the world at different places and different islands, especially in the Pacific. But it is, to us, the D-Day.
The Allied Army now has a firm foothold in Europe, and the American 12th Army Group is officially established to attack Germany.
We see the Hitler wall, his Atlantic wall, being cracked for the first time. This supposedly impenetrable place by this tide of Allied soldiers.
The French resistance movements play a supporting role in this victory.
French resistance is critical, absolutely critical to the success of D-Day.
We managed to smuggle in something like 10,000 tons worth of munitions, you know, courtesy of the resistance, who are blowing bridges for us, who are blowing train lines, who are blowing factories, who are doing what we needed them to do.
By 1944, Charles de Gaulle is accepted as the Free France leader by all.
On August of 1944, Paris falls, and it pretty much decapitates the entire Vichy government.
As the Allies gain ground, Himmler ramps up his plans for the last stronghold in the Tyrolean mountains surrounding Kassel-Itter.
An obvious advantage about going to Austria, the mountainous terrain, it's easier to defend, but also these high-ranking French prisoners. They could all be used as a bargaining chip.
To stop the Allies from entering Germany in December of 1944, Hitler launches a surprise offensive along the Western Front in the Ardennes region of Belgium.
Hitler's offensive into what becomes the Battle of the Bulge is really his last attempt to break the Allied lines in the West.
30 German divisions attack battle-fatigued American troops across 85 miles of the Ardennes forest during the freezing weather conditions.
This was a distant battle in a distant land, and the Americans were dying for the cause of freedom.
And on December 25th, 230,000 American soldiers arrive to restore the Western Front. The American Third Army breaks through the German lines, forcing them to retreat back into Germany on January 24th, 1945.
That Battle of the Bulge, certainly numerically in terms of the deaths and the way in which the Americans fought, I think that singled them out as worthy allies, and not just because they had the kit and the fresh feet and the big rations, but because they put their back into it.
It's just a matter of time now, and you start to see a lot more Nazis thinking about their own neck instead of worrying about what Adolf Hitler wants.
In January of 1945, in a desperate attempt to prolong the war against the advancing Allies, Hitler launches a propaganda disinformation campaign about a highly fortified Nazi stronghold that is being constructed in Tyrol, the Alpine fortress. The campaign is so successful that the Allies fall for it and change their strategic military plans as a result. Allied nations print stories and speculate that highly valued political prisoners will be held captive in the fortress.
This is a last stand. It's a place where their safety, if anything can be guaranteed in war, their safety can be in this, or their captivity can be assured, and one's control over them can be assured in this remote, uncompromising, and very Germanic, I mean, I say that it's in Austria, of course, but very Germanic landscape. I think it's entirely fitting, really, that that is where they ended up.
With Germany's defeat becoming clearer, the VIP prisoners in Kassel-Itter begin to lose some of the comforts they have been enjoying.
If you're a prisoner in any camp, it's going to get worse before it gets better.
They must rely on candles for evening light to minimize electricity use. Food is also rationed to support the Nazis' war effort. More and more SS and Wehrmacht forces are retreating south, and the provisions in Kassel-Itter are given out to provide them with sustenance.
If you are the French elite in your castle, what was comfortable is going to become less comfortable. Resources are scarce. Are you going to feed your political prisoner, no matter how esteemed, if you don't have food for yourself? It's a desperate plight. The Germans aren't just on the back foot, they're being bent over backwards.
On March 22, 1945, British and American troops crossed the Rhine into Germany. German SS troops and Wehrmacht soldiers retreat into Austria to defend the Alpine fortress and ensure that the VIP prisoners do not fall into Allied hands. But their faithfulness to the Führer is wavering. German troops begin to separate into two categories: die-hard Nazi fanatics and those who want to surrender and end the war.
They're on the retreat at this point, and there's no turning back.
Led by Commander von Engel, a veteran of World War I, a highly decorated general in the Wehrmacht army, and a recipient of the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, the Nazi battle groups are a last-ditch effort to stop the Allies from entering Tyrol. Their primary mission, to defend the mountain passes from the incoming Americans by supervising roadblock, construction, and wiring demolition charges to bridges. With the Allies nearly on their doorstep, the Germans transfer some more political prisoners to Castle Itter. On April 13, 1945, Charles de Gaulle's sister, Mary Agnes, and her husband, Alfred Callot, would be the last VIP captives.
It's all about leverage. It's all about a last gasp for the Nazi regime. What can they wring out of their most precious French asset?
The French VIPs hope their liberation will come soon, before it's too late. And there could be hope on the horizon, as Austrian resistance fighters have enlisted the help of a highly decorated Wehrmacht officer, Major Sepp Gangl. Gangl had become opposed to the Nazis and was collaborating with the Austrian resistance.
Gangl realizes that may factor in well to his own post-war fate. So Gangl and his SS are willing to join the French and the Allies.
Well, it's all very convenient, isn't it, the last minute, when the Allies are rocking over the Danube to suddenly decide, oh, I've seen the light and I would like to help the captives in Schloss-Itter, and hey, I'm going to turn these nasty SS boys in while you were fighting alongside them for years.
Noting the locations of obstacles and the numbers of Waffen-SS and Wehrmacht troops to the area, the resistance is able to perform many acts of sabotage and feed intel to the incoming Allies who are heading south from Germany. On April 24, 1945, the American 103rd Infantry Division unit begins pursuing the fleeing Nazis through Stuttgart to take Munzigen. The men cross the Danube River on April 26th near the German city of Ulm and make it into Austria, which they officially occupy on April 27th. Renault shares the information coming in from his radio, giving the VIPs hope that they'll be rescued by a relief force. But fanatical SS troops are all over Tyrol, questioning and killing indiscriminately. Those at the castle could be next.
As things change, and the fact that they have the radio and can hear more and more about actually what's going on around them, it does get to the point where it looks like they are no longer going to be useful as bargaining chips because they're not needed anymore.
And they weren't the only ones thinking this. In Berlin on April 28th, Hitler finds out that his second-in-command has been trying to negotiate peace deals with the Allies behind his back. Furious by this betrayal, Hitler orders the execution of Himmler's chief staff and strips Himmler of all of his authority to ensure he will never lead Germany. The days of the Reich are numbered.
That is really the end, obviously, of the relationship between Hitler and Himmler. It is also a very symbolic moment of the end of the Nazi Party.
The Allies are steadily flowing into Germany, liberating the cities and concentration camps. It's here where they realize the extent of the Nazis' abominable activities. On April 30th, the commander of Dachau flees to Castle Itter with his entire family. But before he leaves his post, he orders the execution of 2,000 prisoners, witnesses to the horrific conditions he put them through. With the Allied forces gaining ground in Germany, Hitler, seeing the inevitable demise of the Nazi regime, orders the execution of all VIP prisoners before they end up in Allied hands.
The SS know who these people are, they know where they are specifically, and for all the information that the VIPs have, they don't know exactly how close the Americans are.
And on April 30th, holed up in his underground bunker, Hitler commits suicide by swallowing a cyanide capsule and shooting himself, bringing an end to his dreams of a 1,000-year Reich.
The writing on the wall is for the regime, but my God, it's ugly. No wonder so many of them committed suicide. Better to die than to be convicted of war crimes ignominiously by the Allied forces.
Without him, there is no Nazi Party anymore.
May 1st, 1945, Gangl is assigned a slew of new duties by his superiors in the German battle group, which he must complete if he doesn't want to raise suspicion. Meanwhile, in Castle Itter, the former Dachau commander commits suicide on May 2nd, believing that resisting the incoming Allies is pointless. His death creates disorder as the Castle Itter guards ramp up their brutality on the non-French lesser prisoners.
oh, to be Lee in that particular moment. I don't think, you cut the head off a regime which is all funneled towards one dictator, Hitler. You snuff him out, he snuffs himself out. Well, you're going to leave chaos in your wake. Himmler's already gone, don't forget. He's the leader of the SS. It's chaos.
The Alpine fortress, the Reich's final frontier, is now completely unraveling. On May 3rd, the 23rd Tank Battalion from the 12th Armored Division is on the move south from Munich. Leading the troops is 27-year-old Lieutenant Jack Lee. He's been the driving force of Company B for 5 months in an advance across France and to Germany, bound for the Alpine fortress of Tyrol. They reach the Inn River and Austrian border at Kufstein. They are met by elements of the battle group Giel, who attempt to defend a bridge, but the Americans easily overpower them, and the majority of the battle group is destroyed. Following the defeat at Inn River, von Engel deploys his remaining 1,400 SS troops to new positions, just east of Castle Litter. They are aware that the castle is housing hostages, and despite Hitler's orders to execute the prisoners, his death has triggered chaos in the German ranks, some deciding to turn on the Reich, and others seeing the prisoners as bargaining chips.
The consequences for the SS was going to be, especially for the Waffen-SS, was going to be much worse than for your average Wehrmacht soldier.
Meanwhile, on May 3rd, Castle Itter's radio shares the news that the American 103rd Infantry Division is in Innsbruck, only 70 kilometers away.
They're right there. They're essentially on your doorstep. This creates a need for action.
This sparks some rare collaboration between Daladier and Renault, who decides someone must leave the castle and bring the Allied unit to liberate them. They turn to Zvonimir Kukovic, the Yugoslavian that had smuggled in the radio for them.
So what unfolds is this movie-like plot of sending a Yugoslavian communist who's serving as the gardener of the operation, the caretaker of the castle, and sending him on an epic bike journey to try to reach American lines.
The SS troops, flooding the streets, stop and question him. But after telling them he was on an errand for the commander at the castle, they let him go. 3 hours later, reaching Innsbruck at last, he runs into lead elements of the 103rd. But the commander will not arrive until midnight. And as he is the only one that can put a plan into motion, the threat on the lives of VIPs from SS troops remain.
They're really getting desperate, and they want to know how to get out of here or how to survive.
But then there's a surprising chain of events at the castle. The German commander suddenly abandons his post and is quickly followed by the rest of the guards. The French VIPs are alone. Suddenly, they have their freedom.
They were free in the castle, but they certainly weren't safe because the entire region around them has the Wehrmacht or the SS, German soldiers, German military units. You can occasionally hear the firing of guns and the fighting. So should they leave the castle, they could be shot, they could be captured. But if they stay in the castle, is the castle going to be overrun? That's their quandary.
You have these two opposing sides politically from the pre-war era and the early war era who are now stuck in this situation together. They're arming themselves because they realize they don't know what's going to happen or who's going to come through the door next. And they're working as a unit together to try to figure out how they're going to survive.
The French VIPs assume that the Yugoslavian handyman, Kukovic, has been captured or killed, and they must make a new plan to ensure their survival.
Who's going to go out to find out what's going on? What kind of message can you get out there? Who's going to defect next? What's going to happen? No one knows.
The VIPs accept the offer of the castle's Czech cook, Andreas Krobot, to seek help.
These are unsung heroes in the war. A Czech cook who also has to try to make it to the Americans. And the whole objective there is to tell them, we are here, come and save us.
Weaving through SS troops undetected, Krobot arrives in Virgil and has a chance encounter with Major Gangel, to whom he reveals the situation in Castle Litter. Gangel by now has defied orders to rejoin the SS and is now with the Austrian resistance as their leader. Upon hearing that the guards have abandoned Castle Litter, Gangel knows that now is the time to rescue the French VIPs and officially surrender to the American forces in Kufstein, only 14 kilometers away. Arriving in Kufstein, Gangel waves a white flag as he approaches Lieutenant Jack Lee, formally surrendering himself and his Wehrmacht men.
It's an unlikely meeting between a German major and an honorary, contrary American tank commander, but they agree that they will all head to the castle and liberate the castle.
Gangel's an interesting character because he's Austrian, I believe. There was an Austrian resistance. It grew stronger towards the end. He made the right call at the very end. He didn't fight with the SS. He betrayed the SS.
Lieutenant Jack Lee recognizes that rescuing these prisoners may be the last battle of World War II and his last chance for a promotion to captain. He volunteers to lead a relief mission and phones his supervisor, Colonel George Lynch, a highly decorated member of the 82nd Airborne Division, and requests permission and backup. Lynch gives the go-ahead and assures Lee that reinforcements will be right behind him. While abandoning one of his busted tanks, Lee chooses 8 soldiers to man the 2 Sherman tanks at their disposal. He also acquires 6 members of Company D of the 17th Armored Infantry Battalion to ride atop the tanks. And so begins the only known American-German alliance in World War II.
This ragtag convoy driving through the streets of Austria must have looked quite comical. You have the honorary Lee in his tank. He has the American soldiers sitting on top of the tank, and they're followed by a German major and a truck full of German soldiers all working together to go liberate French high-ranking politicians who were going to join this ragtag band.
Meanwhile, the Yugoslavian handyman Kukovic has successfully enlisted the help of Major John Kramers of the 103rd Infantry Division alongside French military liaison, Lieutenant Eric Luton. He understands that the French VIPs at Castle Itter are well-known politicians crucial to rebuilding post-war France. Kramers gets halfway to Castle Itter with his relief force and calls for backup, which his superiors deny.
No one contacts Lee, and no one says don't go for Lee. So at least that force is going to get through. But Kramers has the issue of chain of command is saying don't go. We don't know what's out there. Don't advance any further.
Incredulous, Kramers sends back his men, but defies his orders and continues on. But ahead of him, on the evening of May 4th, Lieutenant Lee and Major Gangel arrive at the castle, but they aren't what the VIPs were expecting.
So these former heads of state are expecting a grand army under a general to come in and save them and welcome them, probably with bottles of bubbly. Instead, you've got this cantankerous, disagreeable 27-year-old, a few men from an all-American unit, and Germans to liberate them. So they were less than impressed.
But no sooner had they arrived, mayhem is unleashed. The inevitable attack the French VIPs have been anticipating comes to fruition.
Lee is put in charge, kind of just haphazardly, of this ragtag bunch of people.
Waffen-SS troops emerged from the hills and opened fire on the castle with rifles and machine guns.
You have the French VIPs who are now armed. You have Lieutenant Lee's men who are in the armor and deployed along the ridge and around the castle. And then you have the Wehrmacht soldiers, and they are all firing the same direction to beat back this SS horde that is coming out of the woodlot below them.
Lee orders the French VIPs to hide in the castle's keep. Lee's men and the Wehrmacht troops move to their positions in the castle and begin to return fire.
The defenders of Castle Itter are truly, truly outnumbered. There are thousands of SS that are willing and able to come up the side of that hill and kill everyone there.
Both sides shoot haphazardly throughout the night, but come daybreak, things are going to get worse for the defenders of Itter Castle.
The one thing they have to hope is that they don't run out of ammunition.
That morning of May 5th, the 142nd Infantrymen that Lee was promised would be right behind him finally depart Kufstein, but don't head towards the castle.
The infantry that Lee was supposed to be getting is pulled back. Intelligence is lacking. They don't know what's going on. They don't know who's out there as far as the Americans are concerned. They are pulling back from this action, and Lee is basically left by himself to command this small garrison of people without infantry support.
At 8 a.m., a string of military vehicles unload over 100 SS troops, immediately sprinting to the woods surrounding the castle.
So now you have fresh troops, fresh weapons, they have ammunition, they have everything they need, and they are deploying against Castle Itter from different directions.
The SS soldiers begin pounding the exterior walls of the castle with machine guns, unloading rounds of 88mm shells at the defending soldiers and VIPs. One rams into Lee's tank near the castle entrance, detonating its gas tanks, turning it into a raging inferno.
They're running low on ammo and the numbers just don't work in their favor. Lee plans a very medieval defense, which is appropriate for a medieval castle, and that was castles have various walls. If your outer wall is breached, you move to the inner wall. If that's breached, you go to the keep, the inside, and that's your last stand. If they run out of ammunition, they're going to use knives, bayonets, and hand-to-hand and go down fighting.
With the loss of Lee's tank, the SS seem to have the upper hand. SS troops come flooding in from the tree line to the east and swarm the castle exterior. The American and German soldiers inside the castle return fire from the castle's upper walls, causing some damage to the SS troops below. The French VIPs join their ragtag offensive. Reynaud, Clemenceau, Larocque, and Bouratra all unload their weapons on their Nazi attackers.
In all of World War II, there was not a more mismatched unit that was standing side by side fighting. German soldiers, American soldiers, French politicians, but they fought together.
Meanwhile, Kramers, who had defied orders, makes it to Vurgel and spots the busted tank that Lee left behind. Kramers can't raise Lee on the radio, but then has a bizarre idea. He goes to the town hall and makes a call to the castle on a landline telephone. As the phone rings in the castle, Lee is surprised to hear at the other end a fellow American. Lee manages to explain that they are low on ammo when the line goes dead. Meanwhile, there could be good news for Kramers as 6 tanks from Company E of the 142nd Infantry come rolling into Vurgel. However, they never got the order from General Lynch to head towards Castle Itter and provide backup and support for Jack Lee and his men. But Lynch is contacted and orders 3 tanks, including the Bosch Buster, that will carry on to Itter as a relief force. It's nearly 1 p.m. by the time they leave Vurgel. Although the mishmash defenders are fighting with all their might, they have significantly less manpower than the Nazis firing at Castle Itter.
It's a game of survival, isn't it, at the end? The SS, what's interesting is that they don't run off to preserve themselves, and they keep shooting kind of myopically at the castle, trying to steam down and end it for the captives. You know, it's almost the case of, well, if I'm going to go down, you can too.
Bullets and weapons being used by the SS troops begin to take their toll on the castle's walls. Lee takes some of the troops to the courtyard to reposition, and some of the VIPs follow. Reynaud inadvertently puts himself in the line of fire.
Gangel meets his demise, and so Lee is left all by himself with Wehrmacht soldiers who now have no commander because Gangel could speak English along with German. Lee cannot speak German, and so now he has to command German troops, and he can't communicate with them.
With no time to fret over the loss of Major Gangel, Captain Jack Lee's American soldiers and Wehrmacht men continue to defend the castle. Lee wasn't able to provide proper instructions to Kramers and the incoming relief force before the line went dead. They need to send someone out to guide the American relief to the castle as soon as possible. Jean Boatra volunteers for the task.
He is a very good runner and runs right past the German machine gun, and literally the Germans stop firing because they don't know what is going on when this person's running past them. It shocks them. And he is just as shocked as he's running past, and they're not firing at him.
After eluding the SS troops, he breaks out into a run towards Vurgel, 5 kilometers away. Bouratra finds troops from the 142nd 2nd Battalion. Since he knows the exact positions of the Waffen-SS outside the castle, Bouratra suggests that he lead the American infantrymen towards the castle on the most direct route to Itter.
At this time, it's almost every man for themselves. And if someone is capable of pulling the trigger on someone, give them a weapon.
The Waffen-SS forces prepare to unload another weapon onto Castle Itter, the Panzerfaust. As one of the SS men settles into position to fire at the castle's front gate, He pauses. An overwhelming sound of automatic weapons and tank guns behind the SS troops grows louder and louder.
All these reinforcements are coming in. Lee thinks he's cut off and possibly surrounded. And then all of a sudden, these reinforcements starts coming into the Castle Itter site or around the woods, sometimes behind the SS lines, and they have to try to get out of there as quickly as possible.
The Waffen-SS make a mad dash to the woods, but are rounded up to become POWs.
Everyone is starting to funnel in towards Castle Itter because messages from people who are either on bicycle or running through the woods have finally gotten out. And this chaotic situation is now getting a little bit more settled into an all-out engagement and being able to push away the enemy.
Within 24 hours, the American reinforcements have overwhelmed the SS troops, and the castle is liberated with its occupants.
The German soldiers who helped defend the castle and who surrendered, the few that lived through this, they were not freed, but they were not killed. Nor did they stand trial. They were imprisoned. But they lived through the war, which is seemingly what they wanted.
The VIPs are safe at last, and for his role in protecting the French VIPs, Lee is promoted to captain and awarded the Distinguished Service Cross.
Lee, who was known for being contrary and gruff and short with everything, as the relief force arrives, he greets them with the simple words, "What took you so long?"
Major Kramers transports the French VIPs to Innsbruck with some backup from the relief force. The French VIPs are safely transported back to France, including the two former prime ministers, Daladier and Reynaud, whose mini alliance in battle was now at an end.
So it's really interesting that these two political rivals who were political rivals before the war, political rivals when France was invaded, were political rivals in Castle Itter, were still political rivals even afterwards, and still couldn't say a nice thing about each other as far as Castle Itter is concerned. They still thought to put that in their memoirs about Castle Itter, that they still didn't agree and they still could blame each other.
Over the next 24 hours, Lynch helps to broker a local ceasefire and the surrender of all German soldiers in Tyrol, the decisive end of the Waffen-SS grip on the region. On May 7th, Germany surrenders unconditionally to the Allies, with many of their Nazi leaders now gone.
Hitler's dead, Goebbels is dead, Himmler and Göring were captured and commit suicide, all the top echelon.
It's a long road ahead to rebuild. 1.5 million German refugees poured into Austria before the war ends.
Berlin is reduced to rubble. Entire German units all across the continent have just surrendered or run away, and the long European nightmare comes to an end.
Foreign aid programs are set up to help restore the region from utter chaos inflicted by the Nazis.
Now we have to rebuild Europe. Don't forget that cities had been bombed, which meant that raw sewage was, exposed. People are homeless all across the continent. There are hundreds of thousands of concentration camp prisoners who are now living in displaced persons camps, many of them without food, water, still wearing the uniforms from the camps. Carcasses of cows and humans and horses are strewn across the entire continent. So the war ends, but the toll from the war is going to take quite some time.
The battle for Castle Itter is the strangest battle the world has forgotten.
We tend to think about what happens in Berlin more than what happens in Austria. And I think that is what makes Castle Itter such a great story.
American troops, Wehrmacht soldiers, and captive French notables fighting alongside each other.
Schloss Itter story, whether you drill down into the French narrative, that compromised Vichy regime. Who do we blame? Where do we throw down the moral gauntlet? I think it's more complicated than that, and that's what's interesting about Schloss Itter.
In an Alpine castle that was used as a prison, you literally have one American tank, a handful of soldiers from an American unit, a few French politicians, a famous tennis player, celebrities fighting against the Germans. That is a strange battle.
Late 1944, as weary Allied troops edge ever closer to the German border, they can all but taste the end of the war. But before victory is theirs, the Americans will fight the single longest battle on German soil.
It's one of the largest, bloodiest battles of World War II, yet it's virtually unknown.
It makes no tactical sense. It would have been quicker to go around.
This was the wrong fight to pick, in the wrong place, at the wrong time.
Whole units are completely decimated, and the responsibility has to be laying at the door of the senior commanders who are sending these units in to carry out completely impossible missions.
It's called the meat grinder. So many lives are wasted ultimately for nothing, but very few people know anything about it.
September 1944. The Allied pursuit of the German army has slowed down due to the distance from supply lines and increased German resistance. Both the American and Russian armies have their sights set on Berlin.
The Soviets are coming in from the east. There's desperation on the part of the Americans and the Allies. You got to get to Berlin before the Red Army.
Waiting would have cost them. That was the logic in the fall of 1944, is that if we wait, you know, the Russians will be in Germany and even past Berlin, and we won't even be in the game.
From the western side, the next strategic objective is to move up the Rhine River and prepare to cross it.
The Rhine River is a deep, cold, wide river. Hitler is ordered that the bridges be blown up. You got to get to the Rhine before the bridges are destroyed. The other sense of desperation is this war is exacting such a horrific toll. Holocaust, civilians starving, soldiers dying on the battlefield. The sooner we can end the war, the better. But what General Courtney Hodges, who planned this, what he underestimated was the sense of desperation on the German side.
Commander of the German 7th Army, General Erich Brandenberger, favors falling back behind the Rhine River. But Hitler himself has assured him that reinforcements are on the way, and the Aachen region instead becomes increasingly fortified.
The US Army faces two problems in its campaign through the Hürtgen. One, this is the first time it's fighting on German soil, and however tough the Germans have been, they are bound to up their game when it gets to defending Germany. And the second problem is that they're up against a formidable defensive system in a terrain they simply have no experience of.
Located about 5 kilometers east of the German-Belgian border, the triangular-shaped Hürtgen Forest, known to the Germans as the Hürtgenwald, is 140 square kilometers of state-owned forest.
They're kind of straight lines because it's a managed forest, so, you know, even if you were trying to run and hide, the enemy can conceivably see you.
In 1938, Hürtgen Forest is fortified by the Germans as part of their western wall, known to the Allies as the Siegfried Line.
So it forms a near perfect canopy under which you can build fortifications, under which tanks and airplanes are inoperable.
But the man in command has extensive experience fighting through difficult terrain. General Courtney Hodges is a decorated World War I veteran and well-respected commander.
Hodges definitely knew a lot about fighting this type of battle. He's partially blinded during the First World War. He gets a Purple Heart for that action, and he throws his Purple Heart out because he doesn't think he deserves it. This is the mentality of this man.
He comes from quite a well-to-do Georgian background. It would have been natural for him to go into the army as an officer, but he joins up as an enlisted man. And so for him to go from that to Lieutenant General in 1944 is really pretty impressive.
In August 1944, Hodges succeeds Omar Bradley as commander of the First Army. With 250,000 soldiers, it's America's largest fighting force, comprising 18 divisions, subdivided into brigades, battalions, and companies, all the way down to thousands of platoons of a few dozen men. On September 14, 1944, the American 9th Infantry Division enters Hurtgen Forest. These few thousand men are the battle-weary 39th, 47th, and 60th Regiments, commanded by Major General Lewis A. Craig.
The 9th Infantry Division has been pretty battle-tested for a very long time.
Prior to Hurtgen, these units took part in long combat missions throughout North Africa and France, and are severely depleted.
These battle-hardened troops have seen almost everything. They know what to expect, and now they're being pushed into the Hurtgen Forest.
Most military science says that you don't attack in a forest, especially an enemy who's very well fortified and well defended.
Which is the great conundrum for anyone who studies tactics. Why doesn't Hodges go around the forest is a question we still debate to this day.
It showed the American determination to advance. It told the Germans that they were not going to be able to scare the Allies away, no matter what they did. This was also a resounding message to the German high command.
This is the mentality of one of General Hodges' closest advisors. Fellow World War I veteran J. Lawton Collins has distinguished himself at the Battle of Guadalcanal, and he's earned the nickname Lightning Joe. When Hodges plans to halt for 2 days to allow reinforcements to catch up, Collins argues to begin recon immediately. He sets the pace of the offensive.
And they're sent into the Hurtgen to see who is in there, if anyone, and try to pierce out the other side and hit that Siegfried line.
The Allies enter the forest with several goals. Pin down German troops to prevent them from reinforcing their efforts further north at the Battle of Aachen, and capture the town of Schmidt.
It was like a crossroads town. You could fan out into the countryside, and it was a great place to have your communications as well. So Schmidt is a very, very important position for either side to hold.
The 39th and 47th Regiments are ordered to divide and conquer.
A lot of military training is about following orders, doing what you're told, getting to where you need to be. You don't need to worry about what the goal is. You don't need to worry about exactly what's happening or what the overall situation is. Here is your job. So you're starting off in that type of mentality. As long as you and your mates survived another day, it was a good day.
The initial advance by the 47th Regiment goes smoothly.
In fact, for 2 days, they don't see anyone, and eventually they spot a staff car with a German colonel in it, and they kind of report back, this is what we've seen.
And they find a lone German officer trying to figure out what's going on. So what do these men do? They take him prisoner, they rob him, and then they send him back to the German lines. They don't even think they have time to deal with prisoners. The 39th attacks through the forest and meets resistance. They do not have as easy time as the 47th does.
The Germans have had time to recoup. They're back behind their own front line, and they are digging in. It's one giant booby trap, but you're probably not going to lay the booby trap right on the edge, the further western perimeter of the forest, are you? You're going to bed in behind your own lines.
The 39th Regiment begin pressing forward at Lammersdorf at the edge of the forest. But unbeknownst to them, they are entering a deadly trap.
The terrain and the forest itself is utterly impassable for the Americans to come in. The Germans had built defensive positions throughout, strewing mines all across the forest, building machine gun nests, bunkers.
They start taking casualties almost immediately. This makes them realize that this isn't going to be a cakewalk through this wood lot. They don't know where everyone is around them. They don't know where the enemy is.
The Germans do not expect the Allies' attempt to breach the Hurtgen Forest.
The Germans were dumbfounded as to why the Americans would do such a maneuver. They thought it was crazy, it was insane, And they could not believe their luck that someone would try this.
It must have seemed odd to them that this fortified forest, impregnable is what we'd call it, impossible to pass through virtually, is going to be the focus of an American campaign which up until that point had relied on armor, mobility, and aircraft. You can't use any of those three things in a dense forest. So it's like a gift to the Germans. I'm sure they were surprised.
The density, the thickness of this forest also undermines the Americans in terms of communications. It's hard to see, and radar systems, more primitive radar back then, aren't working properly.
At one point, the only sound coming over the radio is a German warning of Achtung, Achtung, as the nearby town of Zweifel sounds their air raid sirens.
As soon as the radio goes out, you're in a feeling of isolation, that you don't have any support, that you're no longer part of the greater whole.
Radios tended to malfunction regularly. Sometimes the battery would die out, sometimes the signal wouldn't get over a hill. In fact, one officer said that he had to resort to the old hand signals that they were taught in basic training to move men around the field in front of him.
What began as recon has turned into a full-fledged battle. The Americans are on the defensive and woefully undersupplied.
Americans and the Allies have pushed in so quickly that they have outrun everything that they need. They don't have water. Some men don't have rations for days. You can't deploy men into a force if they haven't eaten for 2 or 3 days.
After 2 agonizing weeks, the 39th Division takes control of the town of Lammersdorf.
Huge losses for tiny gains, but the need to win, the need to advance was so overwhelming that these losses were deemed acceptable.
General Hodges has these objectives. He wants this town or this key intersection or this part of the forest. In hindsight, it seems rather arbitrary, and he is not willing to change his mind. The problem is at what cost? And the Americans are suffering thousands of casualties for each seemingly arbitrary objective.
By this point in the war, General Courtney Hodges expects the Germans to quickly surrender due to low morale. But this is absolutely not the case. The Germans have every advantage with the forest fortifications.
The way that I think most commanders would do it if they had a second chance was to wait until you had full concentration of your supplies and then to bring the brunt of your highly favorable ratio of soldiers and tanks and planes to bear and crush the Germans. It was a 5-to-1 tactical advantage in terms of military strength that the Allies had, and it's just wasted, utterly wasted.
The Battle of Hurtgen Forest is intended to build upon the successful push that began with D-Day. The Allies attacked the coast of Normandy in a massive amphibious assault of 150,000 soldiers. They faced resistance as they stormed the beaches, achieving victory, finally, on June 11th. This changes the tide of the war and provides the launchpad to liberate France and Western Europe.
We've got never-ending resources. It's just a matter of getting the resources up to the front. We've got almost 2 million Allied troops, match fit and ready to go.
The British Second Army liberates Brussels on September 3rd and Antwerp on September 4th. Hitler starts acting out in desperation. He appoints Field Marshal Karl von Rundstedt as the commander-in-chief of the German army in the West and orders him to attack the advancing Allies. Soldiers are called upon to fight to their death rather than surrender.
So many committed Nazis go on fighting right to the end, and I'm not just talking about the top like Goebbels, all the way down to the ordinary prison guards who will not let go of their authority and their murderous policies until literally the guns are taken from their hands.
With German forces decimated, their approach is more deadly the closer they come to defeat.
Hitler informed all of his commanders that if they gave up ground, many of them would be dead. You weren't supposed to give ground. You were supposed to hold your ground at all costs, especially when you got to the Siegfried Line, because that's German territory. So Hitler says that you will be killed if you fall back.
On the German side, it's desperate. There is no choice. You're probably going to die fighting, but you fight. Because if not, you're going to get a gun in your back, or you're going to be court-martialed and killed. And these little kids, and these older men, by now they're recruiting middle-aged men as well. They're going to damn well do what they're told. This is Hitler's Germany. You don't have a choice. You know, you dig in and protect your country.
The Americans decide to push through the northeast to capture the towns of Hürtgen and Kleinhau. But the number of American soldiers in the Hürtgen is quickly depleting, and the mood is grim. General Hodges calls in tanks from the 3rd Armored Division to support the 39th and 60th Regiments. The tanks must overcome fortifications known as Dragon's Teeth, just to reach the embattled troops.
Armored divisions were trying to get into the forest to help out and support these American units, and men had to have axes issued to them from the sides of the tanks to go out and physically chop the trees down, because the trees were too large for the tank to run over, and the tank couldn't run over any of them. So these men have to go out there by hand and chop down a road.
What was General Hodges thinking when he was deploying the tanks? It's not clear why such a decision was taken, but the tanks were a resource and they were deployed.
What you actually got in the forest of Hürtgen are tanks being stranded in mud, broken down, being knocked out, and becoming a problem. You know, the tanks are attracting fire and causing casualties. Far from them being the solution to the problem, they actually make it worse.
After you've lost a couple of divisions, you might consider rethinking the game plan. But the danger is you think, well, I've already lost 2 divisions, I'm just going to keep going. You know, I'm going to reinforce that defeat. It's a classic military error that so many make. Hodges ain't the first and he won't be the last.
Despite continued heavy casualties, by September 20th, the Americans reach the Weser Valley, closing in on their objective, the Schmidt Hub.
Schmidt is like a merry-go-round. It's a kind of roundabout of death. All the villages, incidentally, have been evacuated. You know, you can't live there. It's not a place where you live any longer. It's just a bunch of rubble. It's just a place where you might get picked off by sniper fire. If a pillbox hasn't taken you out first, if you haven't stumbled over a dragon's tooth, I mean, the whole place is like a landscape of terror. Can you imagine? You come out of the forest and you land up in Schmidt. It's like, my God, who cooks up a place like that?
The planning for the German defences go back to 1938, when they construct the Siegfried Line. Now, it's not used, of course, for most of the Second World War because the Germans are on the offense. But when they do come on the defense, all these measures they put in place in 1938 suddenly come to fruition and are incredibly valuable. They've been building bunkers and pillboxes so that they create a kind of killing zone in which it's going to be very difficult for you to get past.
And yet, Hodges and other top brass all believe that Schmidt is an important town to capture.
The question is, how do you get there? You've got to come through the wood, funneling you into a field of fire in which you're going to find it very difficult to maneuver. The logic of attacking Schmidt gets completely removed when you think that a flanking attack could have done the same thing.
October 6th marks the Americans' first attack on Schmidt. Between October 6th to 16th, the 9th Infantry Division gains 3,000 meters at a cost of 4,500 casualties.
This is First World War numbers. This is losing a man for every meter and a half. It's a crazy number to think, how can this persist? How can you have all these losses and not see that we have a problem?
Bullets and tree shrapnel decimate the 9th Division.
Those kind of losses that the Americans absorb in Schmidt are monstrous. So you waste thousands of lives over a multi-day fight for nothing. Schmidt's important to the overall offensive on the Westfalen, but not at that cost.
The battle to take Schmidt is a failure, but despite the beatings, the Americans do advance to the crucial supply hub of Monschau. But again, they pay a high price. The 9th Infantry Division is reduced to a small fraction of itself and cannot continue fighting in the forest. On October 16th, the nearly obliterated 9th Division gets some relief. 1st Army Commander Courtney Hodges calls on Major General Norman Dutch Coda to renew the drive toward Schmidt.
The 28th Infantry Division arrives in Hürtgen, and they dive into the woods. These are men of the old Pennsylvania National Guard, and they are sent into the woods to try to break this stalemate. They think they're going to be able to do it. They're battle hardened, they're ready to go. They get into the woods, and they see the destruction from months of terrible fighting. You are literally stepping on the bodies of men who died a week beforehand. It hits you in the psyche when you think about what these men are treading on, laying upon, being around every single day in the Hürtgen.
Fresh from his triumph at Omaha Beach, Dutch Coda has become accustomed to victory. But the German defenses here are surprisingly strong. Pillbox attacks prove to be deadly. American losses reach the thousands in a matter of days.
For those who were in Hürtgen Forest, the entire world is reduced to basically a green inferno, a meat grinder.
On October 18th, a battalion from the 28th Infantry Division arrives in Aachen as reinforcements. And after a brutal battle, the Germans capitulate on October 21st. After Aachen is captured, the 28th Infantry breach the Siegfried Line in the Stolberg Corridor. General Hodges' men are to press forward 10 miles to the Rohr River, capture the town of Düren, before continuing to Cologne and the Rhine.
The war at this point, from an Allied point of view, is we need the Germans to surrender. We need them to realize the war's over. If Germany doesn't have access to its industrial heartlands, then it's hobbled. It will have to capitulate. So that's a very clear, clean target, really.
So there is this huge push to move forward into the Ruhr. A lot of the power plants are located downriver. It runs Germany. If you can take out that area, you can seal off that asset. If you don't do that, Germany still has a lifeline.
But General Hodges continues to pursue other, less productive goals. He insists on repeated attempts to capture the town of Schmidt, an ongoing goal that is as elusive as it is deadly.
It becomes a sort of myopic obsession to capture it, and then guess what? To recapture it. You know, if you've got compromised supply lines, it's very difficult to hold a place like Schmidt. You're making incremental gains and you're losing them again. One step forward, two back. One step forward, two back. And it's losses on a scale that the Americans weren't used to.
On November 2nd, the Americans begin their second attack on Schmidt, led by the 28th Division.
There's no way that they didn't know how bloody and painful it was after the first group went in. If you were a new battalion coming in, you saw thousands coming back out as 300.
The Americans spent much of October in desperation trying to take this small village of Schmidt and suffered thousands of casualties. What do? They try it again in November.
On November 3rd, the 1st and 3rd Battalions of the 112th Infantry Regiment move across the Kahl Valley in hopes of capturing Kammerscheid and Schmidt and cutting the Germans off from their supplies. However, the terrain of the Kahl Trail makes movement of any kind very difficult.
One particular unit, 2,000 strong, is eventually battered down to just 300 men. You know, can you imagine a couple of days in which 70% are casualties? You know, how do you rebuild the morale of that unit? It's almost impossible.
After their first loss at Schmidt, the Germans rely heavily on panzer tanks. On November 4th, the 166th Panzer Division tanks unload their fire on the 3rd Battalion at dawn, ejecting them from Schmidt and leaving them unable to counterattack. The battalion descends into chaos. 133 are captured by the Germans.
And again, you have to remember the Germans have had time to fortify. They've got back behind their natural defensive barriers. They've been given time to regroup. They've laid their hands on anything they can that goes up in a puff of smoke. It's just do what you need to do. Keep them away. Stop them getting across. Keep them out of the fatherland, whatever it takes.
Meanwhile, the US 109th Division is tasked with capturing the area north of Gurmeter. But within 300 yards, they meet an unexpected horror.
I don't know that any minefield is a pleasant place to be, but that one was just horrific, almost impossible to navigate through. So navigating minefields, pillboxes, trench emplacements, heavy guns, all becomes a grinder. It becomes the meat grinder.
The Wild Pig, or Wild Sow minefield, is one of the largest minefields on the Western Front. Mines every 2 meters stretch over a span of 3 kilometers.
Now, how are you going to get through that? It's impenetrable. So they literally have to crawl through and try to find these mines, defuse them, and keep moving while being shot at.
Ultimately, they have to resort to rolling trees through the forest to try to detonate the mines. That's time-consuming, it's not practical, and in a forest that's this dense and thick of trees, it takes forever.
Even after all of those losses and that loss of territory, machines, men, materiel, it's still crazy that Hodges doesn't understand the totality of the loss. It is a loss at that time. How are you going to overcome that loss and go back at the enemy is another thing.
Ultimately, General Hodges comes to his senses and approves the withdrawal of American troops from this little hub, this little village of Schmidt.
With Schmidt lost yet again, the focus returns to the Rohr industrial area and the Rohr River. There are 7 dams at the Rohr River headwater for flood control, drinking water, and hydroelectric power. The Schwalbenau and the Erf dams hold up to 40 billion gallons of water between the 2 of them.
That's a huge amount of water. I mean, if that had been released, it's a nightmare scenario. If the Germans had exploded the dams, the advance through Germany would have become not just difficult, but might have become a near impossibility.
On November 5th, General Hodges receives a top-secret memo from General Simpson of the 9th Army. He is to refocus on securing the Rohr River dams before the Germans unleash a catastrophic flood. Hodges insists that the best path to get there is to continue to press through the deadly forest.
General Hodges yet again ignores the concerns of his officers and the intelligence that the Germans are considering blowing the dams to flood the entire region. His response is, damn the dams.
One of the justifications for going through the forest is to get to the Ruhr dams. There were 7 of them, and 2 in particular are so big in terms of the lakes that they've created that the feeling is if they're blown by the Germans, they're going to unleash a flood tide that's going to really slow down the advance to the Rhine River. And this is going to really impede Allied communication. So we need to get to these dams and we need to take them before the Germans blow them. But that doesn't explain the logic of going through the forest. Yes, the Ruhr dams are at the back of the forest, but they're not in the forest.
What I don't understand is why they don't go round to the southeast if you look at the map and then work your way downstream so that you incrementally pick off each dam that the Germans could have flooded you with.
Hodges created this sub-objective. I can do the dams, but I have to get to this point first. And that's where I see this real disconnect. When you're making a decision and you have a goal, you tend to plan to get to that goal. Most people want to plan to get to that goal with the least steps possible. Hodges is planning to get to that goal by adding additional intermediary steps. And the only reason that he's doing that is because those were the steps he took when he was successful in World War I. You take the towns, you move the line, and that's what he was trained in, that's what he was successful with, and that's what he's repeating here.
At age 57, Hodges is not the man he once was mentally or physically.
Because of his disconnection from those around him, he's not hearing alternate plans or alternate viewpoints, which is leading into tunnel vision for his overall strategy.
Hodges, he misunderstands his soldiers. I think there's almost a kind of a failure of empathy at this point. For him to keep asking this of them and to not step back, it's a profound failure on his part, on a human level.
Hodges is an interesting character when it comes to casualties. He's very hard as a commander and likes to drive and keep moving and keep moving. But his men often say that they've watched him break down when he goes to the hospitals. Any other time, he's hard as a rock. But when he goes into the medical tents and sees the men, he breaks down and cries.
But meanwhile, the Americans are having a horrible time in the Call Trail.
Sending in tanks is not a good idea. It's an even worse idea when the weather conditions worsen. You get a lot of rain coming in. There's a morass on the floor of the forest, and the tanks are just incapable of moving and operating. You either got to get past them, you've got to go and rescue people out of them.
Amidst heavy casualties on both sides, a small glimmer of humanity comes from an unexpected place. German troop doctor Günther Stüttgen has a history of treating enemy wounded at his field hospitals. On November 7th, he makes contact with American medical personnel and negotiates what will become the first of 3 ceasefires. Combat stops for several hours, so wounded can be retrieved and enemy patients exchanged. Hundreds of men survive the Hurtgen forest, who would have otherwise been left to die. Years later, Stüttgen was honored for his actions, which, he explained, came from respect that only soldiers who know the horror of war can have for one another. But in November 44, after the briefest of pauses, those horrors continue unabated.
The weather works to the advantage of the Nazis as well. It becomes brutally cold. It snows. The Germans laid thousands of mines down the Americans couldn't see or detect. So everything about the forest worked to the advantage of the Nazis and worked against the American invaders.
The American offensive force begins to be affected by a defensive mentality.
And they're going to be holding their ground, staying still, being in a covered position. You get that difference between being aggressive and offensive versus a very defensive type reaction where you're just trying to survive.
This reaction extends to some of the highest ranking officers. General Ralph Hübner leads the legendary 1st Division, known as the Big Red One. He makes the mistake when reporting to Major General J. Lawton Collins of using the phrase, keeping the enemy in check. Collins is furious at the lack of forward momentum and orders Hübner to ramp up the attacks. For Collins and his superior, Courtney Hodges, it's forward momentum or nothing. But by mid-November, there is plenty of blame to go around. And much of it is laid at the feet of General Norman Dutch Coda. His 28th Infantry Division is relieved of duty, and the 8th Infantry Division is brought in. On November 16th, Operation Queen begins.
The Hurtgen Forest campaign really occurs in a couple phases. The first one begins in September of 1944, and that's an unmitigated disaster. Finally, later in November, a second phase, Operation Queen, it's most of the same tactics, which again don't work. However, they want to try to use American air superiority, which ordinarily would make sense. But the forest is so dense, so thick, that it renders bombers and warplanes completely ineffective.
With no end in sight, the situation is reported on by one of the most celebrated writers of the 20th century.
Ernest Hemingway, reporting from the front for Collier's magazine, witnesses some of this fighting, and he's completely horrified.
Ernest Hemingway spent 18 days embedded with the 3,000 men of the 4th Division.
You have a kind of chronicler of the madness on a very personal level.
One of the grimmest actions is in late November when a regiment is sent to take the village of Grossow, and in attempting to do so, it loses almost 2,700 of its 3,000 troops. That's over 90% casualties.
And of the futility of the tactics being used by the Americans, Hemingway quipped that it would save everybody a lot of trouble if they just shot them as soon as they got out of the trucks.
And describes it as Passchendaele with tree bursts. That pretty much says it all.
You got shrapnel starting off the branches above your head, so if you're not hit directly, you're going to be hit with something raining down on you that's not just freezing wintry water from God's skies. I mean, it's a nightmare. It's hell on earth. He's reminding people back in America that this ain't just headlines. Oh, Paris, Antwerp, Brussels, Aachen.
The city of Aachen was so well restored that refugees from the nearby internment camp were allowed to return to their homes in the city. The military government section went to work, establishing order.
No, Passchendaele were tree bursts. You know, let's break up that narrative, that success story, and remind people success at a cost. Hemingway will eventually write a novel about what he witnesses. Across the River and Into the Trees, it's called.
A more direct literary account comes from a former professional wrestler, the machine gun platoon leader of Company G of the 121st Infantry.
That amazing character, Lieutenant Paul Bush, writes a great book about it afterwards. Incredibly visceral descriptions of what he'd gone through, what his men were going through.
Lieutenant Bosch's memoir captures the horror as he leads the 121st Infantry Regiment through the thick forest. Bosch sets up a command post and a carrying party to move rations, water, and ammunition for the regiment. German machine gunners catch them in a brutal crossfire, raining mortars and artillery. Bearing witness to the horrors of the forest, the 121st spends Thanksgiving in hell.
Thanksgiving in the Hurricane is a lot different than what you see on any other part of the line. It is business as usual.
On November 23rd, Lieutenant Bosch receives a message that a hot turkey dinner is on its way to every man in the outfit.
They were looking to build morale, but it's also a way to remind people what they're fighting for. The world is going to be safe, and your family and friends are going to be able to have Thanksgivings because of what you're doing here.
Bosch objects. The positions they are in are nearly right on top of the Germans. A terrible time to eat a hot meal.
And they'll know where we are, and they're going to shoot at us, and let's stay low and keep safe.
Despite his protests and appeal to reason, the Thanksgiving dinners are sent in on orders from headquarters. Privates are called back to distribute the meals.
Hodges is playing for a headline game, really. You know, the men were fed on Thanksgiving, you know, as a note home to mom, you know, I had hot turkey or whatever it is you eat, cranberry sauce. You know, there's a kind of, there's a superficiality to his thinking there. Did he really think a gimmick like that was worth any life?
The Germans are lurking closely, and the hot meal service draws attention to Bosch's men. Seven men are wounded and 3 killed for a dinner no one wanted to eat. The 121st must move on after Thanksgiving in hell, but their journey deeper into the woods proves even more deadly. In only 3 days, the 121st Regiment loses 20% of their manpower, 50 killed, 600 wounded.
You've got mines going off, you've got trees exploding. How many times can you jump? How many times can you have that adrenaline rush before you've wiped it out? You just don't have the resources anymore to engage with it.
But throughout this vicious string of close-range firefights, Lieutenant Bosch leads his platoon in the village of Hurtgen, amidst heavy enemy fire. He and his men take cover in abandoned houses, while automatic weapons clatter and buildings explode. In a brutal struggle, Lieutenant Bosch and Company G managed to take the town of Hurtgen, taking 350 German POWs. Bodies of both American and German soldiers littered the streets. For his role in the strategic victory, Lieutenant Bosch is awarded the Silver Star, his second one. The victory at Hurtgen allows American troops to begin to make their way to the village of Kleinhau, the next objective. The 121st Gains in Hurtgen finally placed the troops in decent proximity to the Rohr River dams, the objective all along of Supreme Commander Eisenhower. But the horrible cost to get there is barely reflected upon.
You've got this command structure, so there's this distributed lack of accountability for what's going on here. Nobody is saying, why are you doing this way? Even Eisenhower, who wants the dams protected, doesn't seem to get involved in how to get there. And maybe that's not part of his command, but somebody should have been tracking just how many lives were lost.
Instead of dwelling on the casualties, the First Army commanders seize on this momentum. November 29th, orders from General Hodges come in to take the Brandenburg-Bürstein Ridge, securing a launch position for the U.S. First Army to make a direct attack and secure the Rohr River dams. After enduring weeks of heavy fighting, the 28th and 121st Regiments clear the approach for the tanks to begin their advance toward Brandenburg-Bürstein. The 28th and 121st Infantry reach the ridge, but the Germans have a major defensive advantage: positions on Castle Hill.
Castle Hill is one of the high points of the fight, and that's with no pun intended, because Castle Hill is high, and it's a great vantage point.
With only 11 tanks and 140 infantrymen left, reinforcements are needed to protect hard-won American gains.
The 2nd Ranger Battalion shows up. Very good, well-trained troops.
And this is where you get into differences between Special Forces and General Infantry, where there is more independence and decision-making, where you can adjust on the fly to meet a goal or objective without a very clear plan necessarily on how to get there. And so you find that Special Forces training tends to be very different in terms of initiative.
The 2nd Rangers begin their advance. They quickly overwhelm parts of the German defenses, and they will engage very violently and quickly with the Germans who are trying to defend Castle Hill.
The Germans fire on the Rangers with increasing intensity, but Company D takes the top of the hill.
The Germans were utilizing it to rain fire down on the Americans, and now it's in the hands of the 2nd Ranger Battalion.
Of the Ranger reinforcements, only 22 are still able to walk on their own after this battle. 19 are killed, 107 wounded, and 4 men are missing. But due to their sacrifice from Castle Hill, the Americans can see the Rohr River dams. On December 16th, the battered Rangers on Castle Hill are relieved by the 13th Regiment. But swapping Special Forces back to regular troops will prove costly.
And then they weren't using Special Forces. They were using standard infantry troopers who were trained to do what they were told, but they're doing it in an environment that is really biased against them.
The 13th are unable to hold on to this victory, but the struggle to control the Hurtgen forest is about to be eclipsed by an even bigger challenge, and the Americans won't retake the hill until February of 1945.
One of the reasons the Germans fight as effectively as they do is because they are prepping for what will become the Battle of the Bulge, a position to the south of the Hürtgen Forest.
Of course, the bigger story is going to be the center of attention. The Battle of the Bulge became that center of attention.
December 16th, the Germans launched their last-ditch offensive into the Ardennes.
The Allied planners are completely caught off guard. They were not expecting this overwhelming German regrouping.
When Hitler orders the counterattack, the tanks concentrate their power in just one section of the line, which is an age-old military tactic. And if you can bust through that one section, it compromises the entire line. They pushed a bulge out roughly 60 miles in the American line, thus giving it the nickname, the Battle of the Bulge.
On December 27th, the 83rd Division in Hürtgen Forest enters the Battle of the Bulge.
Both sides sustain horrific casualties. It's also one of the coldest periods of the entire war. The weather claims lives also.
But in contrast to the Hürtgen Forest debacle, Allied forces are now well organized and well supported.
By Christmas, we've got our act together. You're even seeing a change in the law in Britain where women are drafted overseas. We need to back up the boys. You need to feed the boys. You need to supply the boys. You need to administer the boys. And that's what wins the Battle of the Bulge, is this extra manpower, this oomph. Eisenhower comes up to the front, there's another 200,000 plus men. How can the Germans fight that?
Ultimately, Hitler's last-ditch gamble fails. The Americans win. That's really one of the last-ditch efforts by Hitler and the Germans to hold the American line.
The Battle of the Bulge is officially won on January 25th, 1945, but it comes at a high cost. Of the 500,000 Americans who fight, 19,000 are killed in action, 47,500 wounded, and 23,000 or more are missing.
The Battle of the Bulge is a major turning point, and it is heroic. Churchill's right to call it a great victory, but you can't help but to think that at least in part, there's that horrible moment of Hürtgen Forest that kind of haunts them.
Finally, after 5 grueling months, there is still unfinished business in the Hürtgen Forest. On February 10th, 1945, at long last, the Rohr Dam is taken by the American forces. This gives them control of the Erf Dam and 20 billion gallons of water. However, the Germans rally around the Schwabenau Dam and blow the valves open to flood the area.
The Germans do exactly what Intel was hoping they wouldn't do. They blew the dams. But when the dams blew, it wasn't this overwhelming tidal wave of water coming down through the area like Intel thought it would be. It caused localized flooding. It slowed down some of the movements of divisions through the area, but it didn't cause this huge tidal wave of water. It was much ado about nothing for many of the planners.
On February 17th, the forest is cleared by the 82nd Airborne Division when they reach the Rohr River. The Americans are finally finished in the Forest of Hell, which claims between 35,000 and 60,000 soldiers missing, wounded, or dead. The Americans used their position at the Rohr to support an Allied attack on the city of Cologne. On March 7th, the Americans crossed the Rhine as their troops pushed forward to Berlin. 2 months later, the war in Europe ends. On May 8, 1945, the war in Europe is officially over as Berlin is captured and Germany surrenders.
Hürtgen Forest is difficult when you think about the sacrifices made by the soldiers. On one hand, men died seemingly for nothing. But all this fighting, it did serve a role in the larger scheme of the Second World War, and ultimately, the Allies made it to Berlin and won the war.
What's most telling about this battle in terms of the embarrassment and the way which it was fought is the amount of space that Eisenhower, the Supreme Commander, gave it in his memoirs.
It is a story of the Nazi defeat on the Western Front.
He devoted under 70 words to a battle that went on for 5 months and resulted in between 35 and 60,000 casualties.
Supreme Commander Eisenhower has political ambitions. He becomes the 34th President of the United States and lives to the age of 78. General Courtney Hodges continues to be held in high regard until he retires from the military in 1949.
I think history has diminished his narrative because he's not the hero that we've come to expect of great American military leaders. But I don't think we can put it all on Hodges' shoulders.
J. Lawton Collins continues in the military for another decade and survives to the ripe old age of 91. General Norman Dutch Coda is denied further promotions. He's eventually pushed out of the military due to failing health. Lieutenant Paul Bosch survives the viciousness of Hurtgen Forest. His memoir and other written accounts provides a tenuous connection to this largely forgotten chapter of history.
The entire history of the Second World War has many omissions. Hurtgen Forest is one of the most significant ones, and it should definitely be more studied and more understood by everyone.
For a lot of the men who came out of Hurtgen, it impacted them for years afterwards, where they would talk about the bursting trees, or they would talk about the minefields, or talk about losing a friend in Hurtgen. Why is that important? Why should we learn from this defeat of the U.S. Army? Look at the men who were on the ground. I think it would shed a lot of light on what warfare was like, how destructive it could be, and how when you go into something maybe with not as good a plan as you thought you had, that it could have disastrous consequences.